Sit up on the edge.
Okay, well, welcome you to the Kaysville City Planning Commission for September 13. We will start with the opening and approval of the minutes for July 26th and August 9th meetings.
I'll make a motion that we approve the July 26th and August 9th meeting minutes.
Is there a second?
Oh, second.
You want to start us off?
Aye.
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 Okay, great. Next is number 2 on the item, the agenda. It's conditional use permit for an esthetician at 474 East, 1310 South for Brooke Davis.
Yeah, and so as by way of introduction, Mr. Chair, this application you can see on the map in your packet and on the screen for 1310 South, 475 East, home business. Ms. Davis would essentially by appointment have people over for esthetician services, eyelashes, or other services that she offers. What is unique about hers that I spoke with her about is that she would also do lessons. And so it's still one-on-one. It probably wouldn't change the impact very much in my opinion and purview, but would also be teaching and help others certify in those specific traits and skills. So speaking with her and having reviewed it, staff's recommending approval of her proposal without the need for additional conditions.
Thank you. Are there any questions or discussion to be had?
Seems straightforward, doesn't it?
No, it's
All right.
pretty straightforward.
We'll take a motion then.
I'll make a motion that we approve a conditional use permit for major home occupation B for Brooke Davis at 474 East, 1310 South.
I'll second that.
Aye.
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 Great, thank you. 2B is another conditional use permit for preschool at 108 North, 2300 West. Camille Huggard.
Okay, again, as introduction on this, the far west side of town near Case Creek Elementary, in fact, it's across the street. Ms. Huggard, that's the applicant for this, is hoping to run a preschool from her home. 3 and 4-year-olds, again, prior to kindergarten, would come to the home. Classes typically would be 7 to 8 children at a time. Typically, what she's envisioning, that she'd have morning classes Monday through Friday. And she's thinking probably only holding 1 class a day would currently. So I spoke with her pretty directly on a lot of traffic in the area. If people are taking their kids to school at the same time they're dropping their kids off at preschool, might get a little bit messy. So she's kind of already figured that out. Is she would start slightly after. Essentially, the school morning rush picks up, and then they're done well before elementary school is typically out. The other part of that is her home is near the bus drop-off, so not necessarily the main drop-off point anyway, so it sounds like the traffic's not much of an issue. The other bonus is when there are cars out in the street, they're by the school frontage and not in front of another home or something because of that. So our ordinance does have a requirement in it for any group lessons or classes that there be a limitation placed on either the number of students or the number of cars bringing people to that. And so just based on the conversation with her and her needs, staff's recommended approval, limiting the number of students to no more than 8 at a time. And with that, I'll forward it back to the commission.
Great, thank you. Any discussions, questions?
I have a question. How many sessions will you run?
So is the applicant here?
Oh, there you are.
Why don't you come up to the rostrum and state your name, please?
I'm Camille Huggard. I would like to run 2 sessions if possible. Well, Monday through Friday, 3-year-old and 4-year-old class, so possibly 2 sessions.
How long would each session be?
2.5 hours.
Okay.
And so what hours are you planning on running those sessions?
9 to 11:30.
9 to 11:30?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Sorry, let me state. So Monday, Wednesday, and Friday would be a 4-year-old class, and then Tuesdays and Thursdays would be a 3-year-old class.
Okay, so just 1 session a day?
Yeah, 1 session a day, sorry.
Thanks.
Just a question, Lyle. Is there any kind of a standard in the ordinance to indicate the number of students or limitation on cars or anything?
So the standard is, as we've discussed, a little more generic, but it does discuss as a conditional use standard that the Planning Commission should consider traffic and its impact on the areas, and then more specifically, straight from the major home occupation ordinance, there's a specific requirement that there be a limitation on students or cars. So they're kind of congruent. Not one of them states, based on the number of students, exactly what that limitation would be. So we felt meeting the needs, as we felt we weren't necessarily limiting her, but controlling that it accommodated.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Any discussion on this, or should we take a motion?
You want a motion?
Sure. Let's do it.
Okay, I'll make a motion that we grant a conditional use permit for major home occupation B preschool for David and Camille Huggard at 108 North, 2300 West, for no more than 8 students during a class period.
Second.
Aye.
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 Great. Good luck. All right. Item number 3 is a rezone of 25 acres of property at 700 South Desert Drive from general commercial to R2 zoning to include the PRDD overlay zone and the light industrial zoning district for Ivory Homes.
Okay, so by way of introduction, again, this one's been discussed a couple times already with the Planning Commission. Get a little closer so you can hear me. The property directly south of Desert Drive is one that we've been looking at for a while. Ivory Homes has had the property under contract and looking to develop the entire, work on the 25 acres. And originally when they came in, and just kind of, I don't know, testing the water is the right word, but they had a proposal, and the Planning Commission said, you know, we'd like you to maybe look at a little more commercial. You had some requests regarding the type of residential and other things. They came back. Again, the request was made to, you know, go get a little more detail, and in fact, maybe this ought to be brought out a little bit more to the surrounding community to get some more feedback before it comes back to the Planning Commission. And so since our past meeting, we've had 2 open houses, one that the city more or less invited the entire city to. We held it at the Kaysville City Library on one evening. It was very much an open house format, had a couple presentation boards. I think some members of the Planning Commission were there, and many members probably out here in the audience were. They came in. Ivory Homes was available. I was there myself from the city to answer questions, as well as Congo, which is a business that Ivory Homes is working with to consider a location on this property. We probably had, I didn't take exact count, say between 30 and 40 people maybe that showed up over the course of the night to give comment. The bulk of that was probably from the surrounding neighborhood here along Desert Drive and in close proximity to the site. But we did get a little more broad feedback from a handful of people that live outside of this area. My take on that is there was probably no 100% consensus on anything, you know, varying opinions about the project, but the feedback was given such that I think residential from the residents, certainly in the proximity of the site, preferred residential type development rather than commercial type development, but that development be similar to what they have, so larger lot type development. Some of the specific comments, at least those lots that bordered existing homes, be larger if they couldn't all be larger. There are a lot of comments about traffic in the area, and I think that's been talked a lot with the Planning Commission. That's previously we've looked at the traffic study, traffic issues that exist off of 600 West and 200 North, that this neither helps nor hurts necessarily as a development. It's an existing issue, but that generally the residential development would generate less traffic than commercial. Granted, commercial development has a broad spectrum of users that it could be all over the place, so it is a little bit of a guess. But the other comments that were brought up from at least the residents of the HOA to the south, was they wanted to make sure that there were amenities provided with the development so that residents wouldn't go use their facilities necessarily where they weren't paying as part of the HOA. Concerns about where the traffic came in and out, so the lights weren't shining on residents. I think overall there was quite a bit of support for the proposed user, Congo Gym. I gather that there's a fair amount of interest in that type of commercial use in the area. I'll let Ivory maybe speak more to what they are. I don't see Chaz here necessarily this evening, but sounds like he may be here very soon. And then other comments from those who didn't necessarily live close by or a little bit different, where they were interested in, they felt okay that there were different types of housing west of I-15 and that this might be a good spot for it, or that it was probably best to keep it commercial for the tax base and purposes that commercial property tax generates. So I think in short that pretty much sums up kind of the comments and support or concern that were shared on that. A week after that, or slightly longer, Ivory Homes held a second meeting. They had sent invites to the immediate neighborhood. They met on site at Boondocks. I attended myself as well, and it was more of a presentation format, but they shared some of the same things. They did allow for question and had some back and forth. It was just a little bit more organized probably than the open house format, but a lot of I think similar commentary and probably similar faces from the first open house that participated there. Ultimately, they've taken that feedback and we've attempted to incorporate some of that into a development agreement and proposal that's here before you this evening. So again, we're looking at this site here south of Boondocks, the full 25 acres. And you can, if you look closely in the middle of it, there it sits in relation to all the surrounding zoning within the city. What the development agreement's proposing in the current request, and I'll have to explain a little bit, but it's essentially a 50-50 split on the property, so 50% would remain as a commercial use. The request on that northern half that's in purple would be to actually change it, again, still commercial use, but to the LI, it's a light industrial zoning district. And the purpose for that was to accommodate the proposed user. So a gym is permitted both in the light industrial zone and the general commercial zone, but the general commercial zone would demand higher building standards, essentially, more costly, more expensive building. Later on in the presentation, I'll show you some concepts that Congo Gym has put together that they think they could manage at this site. And so that's the intent of the change from GC to LI. Is it's an architectural component more than a use component. The current proposal is to do it all LI. Ivory can speak a little bit to their arrangements with Congo. Currently they're under contract, I think, for about 7 acres of the 12 that's proposed. Could potentially go beyond that in the future, and they can speak to that as well. The R2, which is the second half of the property, is the residential component. So to accommodate the number of homes that Ivory's requested, and we'll look at the plat here in a second. The R2 zoning district does that. It's a 1 and 2 family zoning district. But through the development agreement, we can specify specifically what types of homes are in there. So even though it's a 2-family zoning district, they've agreed to single-family detached homes only. But it is at about 5.8 units an acre. And so our single-family zoning districts fall just shy of that with an R18 that would allow essentially 5 units per acre. And then the PRUD component of the rezone request allows for more flexibility in their design and layout. So it's our planned residential unit development. What that allows for, and I'll show that on their development, are a couple of things. So it does allow for some variation in lot sizes so that they can have some large, some small, keeping within approved densities. It also allows for common open space. So they have, shown here, provided a park amenity. They've got some grass areas as open space, the trail, continuity on the frontage along Deseret Drive. They also have proposed some lots that would be a little bit different than what we would consider a standard lot. It's a rear load single-family residential unit. So it has a private alley that goes down the middle of this green section, and they can speak more to that, and I believe they have some examples. So again, the purpose of the PRUD is it would accommodate and allow for those options that wouldn't be allowed under a standard R2 subdivision. And so to that component of it, again, it's a rezone. It's a legislative decision. You, as the Planning Commission, are the recommending body, and so you have your discretion based on how you feel it works with the general plan, with a specific area, based on the comments that have been received as to whether or not you want to recommend as proposed, if there are some tweaks or changes that you think are important or necessary. If you don't like it at all, you can make the recommendation to the City Council, who would ultimately be the deciding body. One item of note that Ivory and I have spoken to just very recently that's not included in the development agreement would be one item to just be aware of, that if you're close to where you like the development and want to see it go forward, this could be an item just to say, make sure this is in the development agreement, either before it goes back to the City Council or before it comes back to yourselves as the Planning Commission. And that's just the discussion of setbacks. So Ivory is considering a typical setback in an R zone is 8 feet on the side. They would like to be able to put a larger home product on the lot, and so have discussed the option of maybe having 5-foot side yards. We do have that in a few subdivisions around town. And so what that does, again, same lot size, same density, just allows for more variation in the home product that they can actually fit on the lots. Similarly, a 25-foot front yard would be standard. They're looking to potentially have a 20-foot front yard in order to get bigger backyards. I believe the other setback, the 15-foot rear yard, is standard. So it's the side yard and front yard that they'd like to have discussed. And again, just to finish off, when we talked about that light industrial zoning district, the Congo's architect has put together this as an example of something they've been in contact with me about, whether or not they could build it on the property. Under my just initial review on this, my comment was you would not be able to build it in the general commercial zone. If that's what you want to do and if that's acceptable, we need to look at the LI district, and that's why it's before you as the proposed zone. Two different concepts: pitched roof, flat roof, very similar type construction. It's a steel building that they've dressed up a little bit, and that's some of the main components of what would not be permitted in the GC zone. So I think that's quite a bit. Hopefully it covers some things and answers some questions, but again, I'm happy to speak more to it. The applicant is here as well, and they can certainly give more detail. I believe they have some slides and additional pictures they can show. The public hearing has been held on this, so it'll be up to the commission if or how much additional comment you want to take and in what format, but you would not be required to take additional. And then with that, I will turn it over to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. That was an extensive report. Appreciate your detail. I'm assuming that a large portion of the people here are for this matter. Is that correct? No? Yes? No? Okay. Well, I'm inclined to allow some comments. I don't know if you have any strong feelings one way or the other. Okay, well, we've already had a public hearing on this, as the staff said, but we'll have an additional public hearing here. We'll try to leave time for the other items on the agenda, so if you could limit your comments to 2 or 3 minutes, and if someone has already said what you want to say, feel free to come up and give your name and just hit the points directly and concisely, and then we'll go on to the next person. So we'll open the public hearing for any comments on this item. Okay. None. Okay. We'll close the public hearing then. Oh, do you want to say something?
And this is the applicant.
Right.
So.
You can say it as part of the public hearing, or we'll close it and then have you come up, either way. All right, so we'll close the public hearing. Do you want to step up to the mic? Tell us your name, please.
Evening. Brian Prince with Ivory Development. As always, Commission, appreciate the time tonight. And appreciate Lyle's hard work. He's been great to work with, and obviously he's put a lot of time into this. The property owner, the representative for the property owner, which is, as you likely know, America First Credit Union, could not be here tonight. Patrick Julin has come to these meetings before. But I'll quickly give a kind of a brief background and some context to this property. It's been a few months. Last time we were here was, I think, June. America First Credit Union took this property back on a defaulted loan in 2009, 2010. They started marketing the property for sale in 2011, and they've been doing so ever since. The feedback or input that the property owner, because when we started talking about a potential purchase of the property, we had many conversations about what they had done to market the property and why it hadn't transacted. And the feedback we received was, one, that the property was too large relative to its location and access. That the potential buyers they had talked to were smaller users that were looking for 2 to 4 acres, 2 to 5 acres. As a financial institution, they had no interest in becoming a developer and subdividing the property for these smaller uses. And that's been one of the bigger challenges they've had over the years in trying to market and get rid of this property, get it off the books. Another issue was the demographics for destination commercial and retail users were not strong enough for this location. And then, as you can imagine, a single access point from the I-15 200 North intersection is pretty tough. Single access, not easy to get to and attract some of that drive-by traffic. And then I think the biggest challenge they've had is the other opportunities in this submarket. Commercial assets within the city of Kaysville, as well as opportunities in Farmington. And so that's why we've been approached by America First several times. And earlier this year, in January, they came back to us again and said, will you please take a look at it? Before we put the property under contract, I sat down with the mayor and a few of your council members and asked if this was something that they would support. And the answer we received was, yes, they'd be supportive of a higher density residential use if we retained at least 5 acres of commercial, and we didn't propose any apartments. So that's what we proposed initially. And Lyle, will you hit that? So you keep going. That's the kind of the pitch of what they were marketing for many years. So this was when I think when we came to you in June. This was our initial proposal was essentially 20 acres of residential, and in that northeast corner was the configuration for Congo. And at that hearing, the feedback we got from you as a body was, one, there's not enough commercial, was your input. Two, there were some serious concerns about traffic. And third, there were some questions about neighborhood consensus. You know, what does the neighborhood want? What are the surrounding neighborhood concerns? And so what we did was we immediately made the commitment to, go to the next slide, made a larger commitment to commercial, so that the orange area is that 12.5 acres of commercial and the blue is the residential. Go to the next slide. Sorry, next one. And then from there, like Lyle mentioned, we made the decision to have a few open houses to really get a better understanding of what the city wanted to see, as well, more importantly, what the surrounding neighborhood would like to see, and how could we address their concerns. And so this was the proposal we took to the open houses, to the city open house at the library, and then the more smaller neighborhood meeting we had at Boondocks. this is showing 8 units an acre with a reconfiguration of the 7 acres for the Congo Athletic Club facility there in the middle, and then another about 5 acres on the north side in between Boondocks and the rest of the subdivision. And from these open houses, we've got a lot of great feedback. Had a lot of involvement. The open house said the library was great. Great, thank you. But the meeting we had at Boondocks, where it was just a lot of residents in the surrounding neighborhood, was very positive. I think it was very helpful for us to understand what the concerns were from the surrounding neighborhood. And the concerns we got were they were open, and they actually liked the idea of more residential as opposed to 25 acres of commercial. But they really asked for lower density. Lower density, something less than 8 units an acre. Second of all, they were concerned about open space and about having some open space within the development. And then they also, we talked a lot about pedestrian connectivity, connecting the trails within the subdivision to the adjacent neighborhoods. And they were generally supportive of the proposed uses of the Congo Athletic Club and some what could be self-storage or flex office, like what's being built on the north side of Boondocks, that climate office building. So we've come back after getting that feedback from the open house and residents' input, and even after those open houses, I've had several meetings with individual residents and phone calls, and very positive conversations following those open houses. And so the design we ended up with, based on that feedback from the community, was all single-family detached lots at about 5.8 units an acre on the residential. This would, again, consist of all single-family detached homes, no townhomes, no twin homes, no condos. And then with Congo in the middle, and then we'll have about 5 acres on the far north side next to Boondocks. The product that we're proposing to build is 2 different housing products. One, essentially a front-load garage product, and then the second in this middle area. I don't know if there's a pointer on this. In this middle area, just a smaller component of rear load or alley load single-family detached product. And I have a few photos of what that really looks like. Lyle's computer's gone. It's frozen. Should I try it again? You can go ahead and click it.
Keep chatting. It's making me restart your PowerPoint. So.
Well, so I've got some photos I just want to show you of the 2 products. I think the best example I can give you, I got a lot of questions about, can you give us an example of a subdivision or community that Ivory's built that would be similar to this? And Orchard Farms up the street next to the golf course in Fruit Heights, not obviously the apartment complex, but the single-family home community behind it is a good example of the home product and the density that we're envisioning here. And I think that was very helpful to a lot of the residents to be able to go drive through there and get a sense of what we're really proposing. I'm hoping that we've got a representative from Congo Athletic Club, and when I'm done, I'll let him speak to the vision for that facility. So here are a couple of photos of the homes. Ramblers and 2 stories. So here's an example of a home on the front load product. Here's another example of a home that's we'd look to build in there. And then here's an example of one of those rear load homes. So you've got the entry on the front. You pull down that alley, and the garage is in the back. So it's a sense of what we're envisioning there. The other item I wanted to point out, so this is Deseret Drive, and that's the park strip in front of Boondocks. I'll go back to the concept plan. The other kind of design element that I wanted to point out is the park strip designed along Deseret. That's 40 feet wide, we really like the idea of having a buffer between these backyards of these homes and Deseret Drive. We look to continue that meandering trail that could connect into the subdivision to the south and raise the elevation a little bit to as that landscaping becomes much more mature, would be a very nice buffer in between Deseret and the backyards of those lots. The other request we got from several of the residents that live on the south end was a little bigger lot on that south end, the row of lots that are adjacent to the subdivision to the south. And so the smallest lot along that south end would be 70 feet wide, and there would be a few that would be larger than that. So that's, and then the last item I'll point out is in that southeast corner. We're proposing some open space under that power corridor, and then just west of that, a tot lot and an area for kids to play. There would be a privacy fence around that entire thing for safety and privacy, and then a nice access from the subdivision. So that's kind of a general vision of the subdivision, the residential subdivision. I'll let Chaz come up and speak about and answer any questions you have about Congo Athletic Club. Are there any questions I can answer?
I would like to ask a question.
Yeah.
Do you have any conceptual drawings of the general commercial? I would be interested in how a building would fit on that configuration versus your June.
We don't. I've got some representatives here from Coldwater Capital that are looking at purchasing that property. I'll let them speak to what they are envisioning there. We've had we don't have any defined for that parcel in between Boondocks and the rest, but the users or developers we're talking to are interested in kind of an flex light industrial type of product like you're seeing on the north side of Boondocks, and there's been a lot of calls about self-storage. So,
do you know the dimensions of that?
That is going to be around, I bet that's a great question. It's going to be more than 300 feet deep.
I have a question. So how many lots? Because I didn't count. How many
So
lots?
it's a little over 12 acres, that residential subdivision, and there are 70 lots.
70 lots. And then what are the price ranges for the homes
Um,
that will be over there?
I guess another point I'll make is we are showing that rear load product because we wanted to have two different product types, because they're in our market analysis. There definitely is a buyer in this market that wants a new home, wants to stay in Kaysville, move back to Kaysville, has no interest in maintaining a big yard, and so the rear load product is targeting that buyer. I think the price ranges, we're hoping to have a price leader under 400. I've been asked this a lot. I think the average price is going to be in the low to mid fours.
Okay, for both types of
For
homes?
the rear load,
The
I
rear
think
load.
our price leader will be in the threes, hopefully.
Okay.
On the rest of it, we'll hope to offer product in the 400s.
Okay.
But very little of this will be spec. The vast majority of it, as you probably know, the Ivory model, we'll build a model home, and most of this will be pre-sales. We'll have buyers come in, select a floor plan, go through a design process. And so the market, I say that because the market is really going to dictate what happens here. And in this market, I don't know what, I'm surprised every year as far as what people are willing to spend and the money they put into the home. So.
Okay. And will the privacy fence go around the whole area or just the open space?
We certainly will have a fence in between Congo and then along I-15. What we do on the south end, I think it depends on how we certainly will have CCNRs for the community to restrict the types of fencing. We found that it's very advantageous to restrict the fencing products and the types. Some folks really want to define what that privacy fencing is on their specific lot.
Okay.
And so we're open either way. We've done subdivisions where you put up a vinyl fence and then you sell them a lot, and somebody else owns a lot, and they go in there with a sawzall and they cut it down. So, but we would not be opposed to putting a fence along the south end for a more of a consistent look for the residents that move in there.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for the Ivy representative?
The only other, I'll let Chaz speak because I know there's questions about Congo, and then I do have a representative here from Hales Engineering. The big topic in our hearing in June was traffic, and the request or challenge we were given was we were challenged to do a comparative traffic impact study. The question that you asked us in June was, what is the traffic impact for this proposal relative to if this was all built out as general commercial? We don't have to go over that extensively, but I wanted Scott from Hales Engineering to come to be able to answer any questions about that study, because the results of that study show that the traffic impact will be much less with this design relative to if it's built out under the current zoning. So with that, I'll let Chaz.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, how are you? I'm Chaz Walker. I'm the owner and operator of Congo Athletic Club. A little bit of background on what we do. We've been around for right around 7.5 years. We started as a youth athletic facility where we did custom workout plans for youth as far as speed, strength, agility, and diet plans. About 4 years ago, just under 4 years ago, we got into the comp sports realm. So we have somewhere around 350, 400 athletes that participate in our comp basketball, comp baseball, comp volleyball, and tennis youth clubs. So the reason for us needing a bigger facility is to not utilize other rec centers around to be able to run our practices. It's not going to be a general gym per se. Everything that we do is personal training-wise, and then as far as the practice schedule and everything like that, it's all based on practicing our teams and practicing our athletes. So it's not a just first come, first serve, open at all hours of the day gym. We have gone through kind of the ringer of over the past 2.5 years of different renditions of facilities that we need. Gone anywhere from 100,000 square feet down to this. We feel like this is a good product as far as making sure that we get what we need out of it, as well as not overexpanding us as a company. We've opened the communications with the mayor as far as possibly making this a Kaysville Rec Center in a sense, utilizing it for recreational sports for the city. I actually live in Kaysville, so I've wanted to put the business here. We've been in Kaysville for the past 2.5, 3 years, and so my goal in putting this in Kaysville is being able to open up facilities for the city of Kaysville that are in other cities but aren't allocated in Kaysville as now. And so we've looked at opening up clubs as far as pickleball clubs and different things like that to utilize our court space inside. The actual setup of the building is there's right around 24,000 square feet of basketball courts, hard courts in there for basketball and volleyball, 14,000 square feet of indoor turf. And then there is our gym, and then sports med and physical therapist that's going in there. So that's kind of what's going in the building, and then there's a plot of grass outside for our athletic clubs to utilize as far as our soccer and baseball side of things go. So that's a brief overview. I'm sure there's a lot of questions as far as times and different things that athletes will be there. Our main population of people is in Kaysville, kind of the Kaysville to Layton area. We stretch from Bountiful to South Weber as far as as our clientele goes, but a lot of our kids are coming from the Farmington, Kaysville, Layton area already. So with that brief synopsis of what we do, I'll open up to questions as far as anything goes.
Where are you currently located, your facility?
Just east of Barnes Park in the industrial, kind of the commercial area just over there.
Okay.
So we've gone from kind of 1,000 square feet up to 5,000 square feet into a 10,000 square foot building, and we're looking to move into this as kind of a stay-at-home place for the future.
Okay.
What's the square footage of this building?
The footprint is 60,000 square feet, and that's kind of the allotted square footage is kind of what I said before, 24,000 of basketball-oriented space, the 14,000 square feet of turf, right around 7,000 for the gym, and then just under 4,000 square feet for the physical therapy and sports medicine.
So what will your hours of operation be?
We are based on kids going to school, so we're about 2:30 till 8:30, 2:30 to 8 usually. Certain practice hours go a little bit later into the 8:30 hour, but as far as the sports med and the physical therapy go, they'll have their regular traffic during the regular hours of 9 to 5. The gym side of things is very sparing until about 2:30. And then that's when we have our practices, our trainings, start from there and go till about 8.
Do you envision it being used as an indoor soccer field for adults? You know, sometimes they play.
Yeah, so we've actually looked at doing men's and women's basketball and volleyball leagues, as well as futsal and indoor soccer on our turf. We can fit 2 indoor soccer fields in there. There won't be walls per se as far as an indoor soccer facility, but we have looked at and talked to 3 or 4 clubs around Davis County about utilizing it for both their youth and then opening up for adult leagues.
Okay, so that would extend your operational hours.
If we do get into the adult stuff, like I said, we've been in contact with a couple big pickleball representatives in the western U.S. as far as being able to utilize that indoor court space as pickleball stuff. So that would make the gym operate earlier to accommodate for the adult leagues.
Okay, thanks.
Did you look at other options besides a metal building? And if so, what did you look at?
Yeah, we looked at concrete tilt-up and masonry. The cost-effective thing for us with how big we were going and kind of the free span we needed to accommodate the basketball courts made the most sense for the metal building. There's a couple different products out there as far as the paneling goes to make it mirror a concrete building pretty dang close. As far as driving on a street about 10 to 20 feet away, it's hard to differentiate metal from the products or metal from concrete with the products we've looked at. But the cost difference was dramatic enough for us to look at this option and kind of make this our first option per se, because of it almost is about a 40% less cost for us with us having to span almost 200 feet for the courts.
So, Lyle or Andy, I guess I'll just ask the obvious question. I'm assuming that metal buildings are not allowed in GC. Is that why we went LI?
Correct. So, yeah, the GC, under Title 18 in our building section, there's a building design standards that's applicable to GC and central commercial zoning buildings. So the standards are not applicable to the LI, and they state that steel buildings are not permitted. Steel is only permitted as trim type material.
Are concrete tilt-up buildings allowed in GC?
I believe a concrete tilt-up would be permissible.
Okay.
So these pictures that we have here, are these So do these reflect those? Looks just like it looks like a steel building. You were talking about having some surface that makes it look like it's not. That it's
So the white portions, kind of the trim, vertical white portions, are the concrete look-alike, I guess you could say.
Okay.
And we've proposed kind of to change the metal facet, kind of the riveted look of the darker gray, to those smooth exterior types. And that's why we went with those two options of extending the panels above the angled roof to have it mirror a concrete tilt-up with the flat portion. And so that's the differentiation, is kind of the regular product type is kind of that darker gray look. The white look is the smoother concrete / stucco look. The build out of the black entryway would not be metal. It would be a facade of some sort with the full paneled glass entry. So the difference is kind of the dark gray to the white. The white is the look-alike.
Do you know what the height of the building would be, and whether it would be visible from Deseret Drive?
So
The configuration of the house is buried pretty far back, and it looks like the only place you're really going to see it is from I-15, depending on the height of the building.
yeah, and we're more worried about the frontage of I-15. That's why we were okay with the configuration of the lot. The height of the building, the walls are 24 feet, and it arcs to about 32 feet as the pitch. If we go the extended wall look for it to be a concrete type look, the entire top would be right around 32 to 33 feet.
Is Kaysville Business Park, are there any metal buildings over there, or is that all masonry?
So
and
the
concrete?
Kaysville Business Park, it is in the light industrial zoning district, but it's also governed by the some pretty tight covenants and restrictions. It also does not permit steel buildings, so it's a lot of split block or tilt-up type construction.
And the reason for the communication with the mayor, as far as is hopefully being able to partner up with Kaysville City to utilize this as a rec center of some sort, was to look at us doing all of the funding, the build out, the maintenance, everything like that, and really just looking at a little bit of leniency on the building side of things, but making it open for the public in certain hours. For the use of the public, because I live maybe 2.5 miles away, and the nearest gym facility is a couple cities away, I guess you may say.
And I will state to that, I think the conversation's been opened up. I don't know, Chaz, if he's actually met with the mayor, if there's been any headway one way or another with it. I think the idea is still just very open and unexplored on any type of partnership.
Yeah, we've talked to the mayor. I've talked to the mayor twice. We actually have a meeting Monday at 10:30 to really get down in the details on everything as far as that goes.
Will you own the building then?
Yes, so we would be the owners, and we would operate out of the building.
Okay. Do you need Kaysville City as part of your business plan?
No. No, we've got private funders as far as banks that have already approved us, and private equity partners that will come into the building with us. The conversation with Kaysville City is strictly to utilize the amenities of the building that's going to be there for the city of Kaysville. We don't need the city of Kaysville to come in with us or help us with funding it in any shape or form.
Do you know what kind of signage you would need or plan both along I-15 and on Deseret Drive?
We would
Assuming
utilize
more than just the big K on the building.
No, we would just utilize the back of our building. We don't have any plans for a big billboard of any type. It would mainly be utilizing the back of our building, with it being close to I-15 as our signage. The only other option we've looked at is the billboard type that Boondocks has, but we've kind of steered back to utilizing our building with how close it is to I-15 for our signage. We're a very destination-based business. We don't need signage. It's more about our internal clubs and the memberships that we do have for our personal training that drives the business. We don't need as much kind of drive-by signage or anything like that. It's more based on kind of our internal club teams.
So I have a question. You said you have 300 to 400 members or students or people in the building. That's, I mean, on an average day, how many cars and how many people do you think you'd have?
They're mainly drop-off because I would say out of those 300 to 400, there's under 40 that actually drive. We're ninth grade and below is a lot of our clientele with our sports teams. They're usually being driven there, dropped off, and coming and being picked up an hour and a half later after practice. So it's not a heavy populated area when it comes to the parking lot being filled. The only reason for so much parking is for the possibility of running scrimmage games or something like that and having people stay to watch practice or watch the game on the varied amount of times that might be. It might be 5, it might be 8 times a year that we end up having a bunch of those parking stalls filled. But it's usually bring, drop off, come back, and pick up.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, any further questions? Been very helpful, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Should we have some discussion about the traffic study? Any questions about that? The general result was that it's probably less traffic than if it was stayed all commercial, right? But we can't really tell.
That's the general result of the study.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you for coming out. I'm not sure we'll call you up unless you have something you'd like to say. I don't know who.
I drove quite a way, so I'm going to.
Please do. Tell us your name.
So I'm Scott Johnson with Hells Engineering. We were contacted back in May or June to do a traffic study per the city's request. As part of that traffic study, we looked at a comparative analysis of different types of land uses. We used the Institute of Transportation Engineers trip generation manual, which is industry standard for approximating and forecasting what land uses will generate traffic-wise. So it's each land use has a different function which generates traffic. So, for example, a residential land use would estimate it using the number of homes, number of dwelling units. For commercial, it's either by square feet. There's some other; those are the main ways to do it. So we looked at two possibilities with the existing zone. One was just a general commercial, like a retail / office type development, and this required some approximations, without a specific plan. But we estimated that during the evening peak hour, which is the busiest time on that roadway, a general commercial development would generate over 1,300 trips in the peak hour, compared to the 666 trips that we estimated with the proposed land use. So that's almost double the number of trips. We also looked at a scenario with office buildings. The evening peak hour was higher by about 50 trips, but the big difference came in the morning, whereas in the morning the proposed land use would generate approximately 290 trips. An office complex would generate 942, so over 300% higher in that respect. And one other note, since the traffic study was completed, the number of units have been reduced. So this would be a conservative estimate on the trip generation.
That's helpful. I appreciate that.
Any other questions?
I just have a quick comment or question.
Yeah.
There's really no discretion that you input into your analysis. In other words, correct? Like you look at some tables in the trip generation manual, you look at the use, and it's a matter of putting them into the model, and it spits out the number of what the trips are, right?
Right.
So it's not like you're skewing this bias toward whatever, right?
No, we put it gives us an equation, that's in a plotted line. We input the independent variable, which in this case is the number of homes, and it gives us a number. There's no additional input on that.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for making the trip. Okay.
Are you opening it up for our discussion?
Yeah, I think that's where we are.
Okay. I had just a general question, and I would like maybe some input from you. My initial thought is on the steel building. With it being like it will set a precedence for the others, I believe, and it is right at the introduction to the homes that are there. If for some reason the use changes, that building's going to be there a long time. And so that would be my only comment or concern.
Yeah, and I agree. I was thinking a little more broadly in the sense of putting in light industrial there and have whatever use comes next. And, hopefully Congo stays there forever, but if it doesn't, then who's the next owner and what does that look like? So, my concern would be that, or maybe a suggestion would be, is to make sure that development agreement requires a higher standard. And I have a hard time envisioning, what this looks like and how good it can look, but I have a similar concern.
Exactly.
But the same side, we are talking about right up against I-15, right? So
It's true, but I agree it sets a precedence for this general commercial area that's still open.
well, that'll still be general commercial, right?
Okay, never mind. That zoning's different, isn't it?
So the concern we have to
It'll
worry
stay
about is
general?
the LI portion.
Oh, so yeah, probably just semantics there. So the property to the north that is general commercial would remain.
Okay.
The request shown here would be to change south of Boondocks to a light industrial. Okay. And yes, you would be able to, within the development agreement, limit uses as desired, ask for extra architectural requirements. That would be the place to do it. You could essentially ask for the moon. They may or may not agree to it, but you've got flexibility on the types of things you can do there to your concerns.
But, let me just say, this right here is where the blank block of what is said general commercial on the drawing we've seen. But the way that it's proposed, it's all LI. But you're just saying that the development agreement could be tailored such that this, in effect, becomes general commercial. Is that what you're saying?
And correct. And so what Mr. Prince has alluded to as well is the users that they're currently looking at. The flex space would be allowed under a general commercial zone. Self-storage or something would not. So that would be one of the differences between the two zoning districts.
So Lyle, let me clarify, because I don't think this map is actually accurate now that I look at it. The intent and what I was, and there may be a miscommunication, the intent is to have LI on, it's 25 acres. The northern half is LI, the southern half is the R2 PRUD. And the reason being is other users for that northern piece would be accommodated under that LI more so than, like you see to the north of Boondocks, more so than the general commercial.
So a question I have maybe for Lyle. So, let me just see if I first restate what you said. Storage units are not permitted in general commercial, but they are in LI, number one.
That is correct.
And then, is there anything that is, well, let me see if I can say it this way. In terms of permitted uses, does LI say, here's, all 10 things or whatever it is that are permitted, and then general commercial, everything that's permitted in LI is permitted in general commercial except a few things. Like there's some things taken out that are not permitted. Is that how it works? Or are there things that are allowed in LI that are not allowed in GC and vice versa?
Okay. Yeah, so they're extremely similar. In general, the light industrial zone allows more than the general commercial zone does. Some of the differences, for example, light manufacturing would be permitted, I believe, in each. We're looking it up just to make sure we get it to you correctly.
Yep.
One is permitted, one is a conditional use type process under the general commercial zone.
But the storage is the one thing we're talking about that's a real possibility that wouldn't be in general commercial.
Yeah, of the uses proposed, storage would be the only thing that wouldn't have been previously allowed under the general commercial. And then, again, the architectural style has some different restrictions from the light industrial to general commercial zone. There are a few setback differences from residential development. It's a 20-foot. Your building can't be closer than 20 feet in a general commercial zone to a residential boundary. It bumps up to 30 feet in the light industrial zone. So in some senses, they restrict themselves more, at least with that setback and buildable area. I don't think it'll impose on the development much, frankly. But and then in other senses, it is typically a more permissive zone to go to the light industrial. So we could read through that now, that specifically the differences in the zones and the uses, if you'd like to look that over. It could be homework and preparation for the next meeting or something. Up to you what time you'd like to take towards that. But they are, in a lot of ways, very similar with the uses permitted.
So that will be light industrial.
Yeah.
Okay.
Even though it says that.
Yeah, so that's wrong. Okay.
So, Brian, have you thought about keeping this rectangle general commercial and then just carving out a square for Congo as LI? And what have you thought about that?
We've been working with a lot of potential, I'll call them partners, or users for that space north of Congo. And I have a few of them here tonight, and I'll let them get up really quickly to speak about their vision for it. But of the users that we've talked to, the request has consistently been LI for the flexibility that it provides beyond the general commercial. So I'm the residential guy, right? I'm the home builder. I'm not going to pretend like that's my business. I'm doing this to enable the subdivision and come up with a plan that's the highest and best use of that 25 acres, but that's viable in the marketplace. And so if you want to take the time, I've got Beyond Congo, a partner here that is looking at that 5 acres that can speak to their vision for that product.
I have a question really fast for Lyle or Andy. So where the climate building is that general commercial?
Correct.
That
So
is, right?
Boondocks is general commercial, as is Climate, and the other buildings under construction there.
Oh, general commercial. Okay.
The city's operations center is light industrial.
Okay.
So an option would be perhaps to have the Boondock or the Congo site as light industrial with development restrictions in the agreement, and leave the rest of it as general commercial. And then if there is a user that does need something more or wants something more, they could then come in and apply for a rezone at that time, and we could review that specifically.
Okay.
Now, if that was in the development agreement, would the development agreement lock in the zone? Or because if then they'd have to come in and not only ask for a rezone, but an amendment to the development agreement, right?
It depends how we craft the development agreement.
Yeah.
You're absolutely correct, but we could write language in that deals with that so that, because effectively the developer of the other 20 acres, just as you're saying, Commissioner Sunloff, would have to agree to the changes on the 5 acres. They're no longer a part too.
Right.
But smarter minds than mine can craft some language that would exempt them from having to participate with any changes on that property within the agreement.
When this swath of land was, I suppose, the most recent rezone when it was blocked out as general commercial, was this LI parcel where Tri-City is ever general commercial and then a rezone to LI, or was it sort of agricultural to LI? Maybe that's Andy's question.
I believe it was agricultural, and then to LI with
The city's
the
property.
City Operation Center.
Yeah.
And the uses that were proposed to go on it.
So, in other words, I guess one reason why I asked that is there was a legislative decision made in the past to make this whole parcel commercial, and we're just, just stating the obvious. We're trying to debunk what was decided previously.
But it is this is obviously a council decision, so
Right.
we don't make that decision either way.
Right.
Recommend.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, just a comment. As I view this, I look at it in three different parts. The first is the residential. Personally, I think this has come a long ways. It looks like a good use for the property. You've met some of the neighbors' needs, bigger lots in the south adjoining property line, some green space. The second aspect is the Congo gym, light industrial area, and the third is what's on here is general commercial. And do we try and keep it, or do we let it all be light industrial? I thought as we kind of attack these one at a time, we've kind of focused on the light industrial, but are there any questions on the residential? Does that look good, or should we discuss that more, or is that part okay?
Well, this is kind of bridging those two. Is this designed to have that the long kind of straight street that parallels Deseret? Does that exit onto Deseret? Desert. I mean,
Yeah, we'll pull it back up here. So it does. It has two entry points onto Deseret Drive.
Yeah, it looks like that's a street.
It was like one here, one there.
Yep.
So the proposal or the envision is to have that trail corridor connect into the existing sidewalk and then run into the subdivision, and then it'll run from here into the open space and then connect into the existing trail network to the south and to the west. And again, it's a little deceiving. This is quite a large open space corridor. It's about 45 to 50 feet wide. And so it would, the hope or the intent is to provide a nice buffer between the backyards of those homes and Deseret Drive.
I drive by that quite a bit. Does the staff feel like that usage, and I know it's extends further down the street, is that a successful use like that, to have that big parking? And
The trail portion?
Yeah, just it's like that 40-foot wide or however long it is with the kind of meandering sidewalk.
Yeah, the Dominion Energy has a pipeline that goes through that area, so there's not a lot else you can do with it.
This is already there. It'll look
Yes.
Correct.
maybe not as brown, but
No, I mean that's what I'm saying. Is that you're saying there's not much else to do?
Correct. Yeah, they've got easements and restrictions.
As was
on it.
mentioned, it creates a good buffer off of Deseret Drive, which is intended and is a major street.
Yeah. And then the landscaping, all that's paid for by a HOA or in the CCR. Is that how that works? Okay.
I think obviously there would be the standard right-of-way that is owned by the city, and then anything beyond that is part of an HOA
Yeah. Okay.
and would be owned by the HOA.
So I'll just make my comments. I know there's, we've heard some concerns, and maybe there's a thought that we need to keep looking at this. I guess where I'm at is, first, when I compare it to what the general plan says, I see a few things that, in my mind, weigh in favor of recommending approval. One is the general plan talks about if there is going to be housing that is of a little higher density than 2 units per acre in Kaysville west of I-15, it would be along, it actually says some higher density housing along the major streets. So this, in my mind, is some higher density housing along major streets. It's still single-family detached homes. The other portion of the general plan which, by the way, just so we're clear, is one thing we look at when we're looking at a legislative decision on a rezone. What does the general plan say? What have we said as a planning matter we want the city to look like, and we try to conform any rezone, generally speaking, to that. So that's where I'm going with this. Reserve land and promote development that is high quality, diversified, and adaptable to changing conditions. In my opinion, I think this is diversified. It's a mix of uses in a sense. It's adapting to changing conditions in the sense that I think this is a housing product that maybe is in demand in Kaysville, maybe particularly more so west of I-15, and it will address that need. Housing costs are increasing, and affordability is a relative term, and relative to what's west of I-15, these would probably be more affordable relatively. And so in that way, it conforms to the general plan, in my opinion. One of the biggest concerns that we heard initially when it came here was traffic, and I think that was an appropriate concern. And I think the biggest piece of traffic that, or with respect to traffic that weighs in favor of approval, is the big disparity in trips generated by this proposal versus what it would be if it stayed the zone that it currently is. So there's no doubt about it. We have traffic issues that come down here, as it meets up to, I forget the roads, and then as it meets up to 200 North, that's a big problem. But it was going to be a problem regardless, and there are things that need to be done to address that no matter what came in here. And the fact that this creates less trips, generally speaking, is going to make maybe a smaller impact on what's already a bad problem. So traffic, in my mind, is not as big of a concern that it maybe was initially. And I think it's a good compromise. It sounds like the owner, or Ivory at least, has reached out to the neighborhood and gotten comments. And if the lack of comment in the public hearing today is an indication, it seems that the neighborhood is relatively on board. And so, in my mind, all those things weigh in favor of recommending approval. The one question mark I have is this block, and I don't know that I'm super enthused that storage units would come in there. I'm not as concerned about the look of the metal building. I think it looks decent, and wouldn't look out of character for what is along here. So that's where I'm at.
I agree with a lot of what you said. And maybe you mentioned this, but I think the one concern that's still not resolved is the absence of the removal of commercial space. I think a lot of people around Kaysville, not just in this neighborhood, but generally, don't like to see commercial space be taken away. Yet, I think we've also been told that the market's not really open to a lot of commercial use here, or it would have happened over the past 5 years.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think this location has a challenge too for commercial uses. It's adjacent to the freeway, so it's tough to develop with anything residential. But it's not very accessible for commercial use either. Generally, commercial uses want a lot of really easy accessibility, and this doesn't really have that.
Yeah.
You did get the Boondocks to go there, but it's kind of a destination place.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like Congo's going to be a similar kind of a deal.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's about the best you're going to get for commercial uses along there. And from that standpoint, I also look at the challenges that we have with housing affordability now in the state lately, and thinking a little bit of a trade-off for that along this location. To me, I think it's a fair trade-off.
I was just going to say, just to put it out there, since this is the last really large parcel of land we have, and I know that City Council's talked about revising the general plan, updating the general plan. I just want to put it out there that I know we've got one in place, but the general plan hasn't continued to serve us because we don't have enough sales revenue. And building more houses is going to mean that we're going to have more, more shortages. So I just want to add that to this, that this is a great, it's a big piece of land. It's an awkward piece of land. I can understand why it's not really something that's selling, but we also haven't really seen any other land usages for this space. This has been, I think, been the first that's presented a plan to us. So I just wanted to put that out there, that we don't have to necessarily rush to get rid of the last commercial space that we have.
And I think that's a valid concern. Where I've come down on that is the types of commercial uses that generate more tax revenue are kind of like what Wilf was saying. Don't want to come in here, otherwise they already would have. I don't know how many years it's been that America First has been marketing
like I
it.
said before,
2011, I think.
They started marketing it in 2011.
Yeah.
And they've gone through a few different brokerages. And again, the general consensus is exactly what Will said is one, they've tried to attract a major institutional business user there, and the access is a big issue. And then any kind of traditional commercial retail doesn't have the drive-by traffic to support a location like that. And then the other, I think the biggest challenge is there are better opportunities within your city and south of here, meaning a commercial user, there are existing vacant buildings within your market and sub-markets to the south of here that are better opportunities that are lower cost. They don't have to build anything. And then again, the other big challenge they've had is America First has not had any interest over the last several years of becoming a developer and subdividing it off. And so I think we've seen personally, as we're trying to piece this together, some interest in smaller parcels for smaller users, but I know they've had a lot of challenges over the last 6 or 7 years in finding some type of big, like a car dealership or something. The access, I think, is a big challenge.
So just to put a point on that, what we're left with is trying, or what a developer is left with, is trying to attract a commercial user that might be a lesser generator of tax revenue. And I think that's reflected by Congo. And I guess...
So if you make a great point. I mean, I think if it's not self-storage, it's flex, industrial, or office space that is commercial, but it is not a big tax generator, right?
Yeah.
How does, Andy, how does the kind of generic sense of the tax revenue producing compare with light industrial and general commercial? Is it generally general commercial brings in more?
Keep in mind there are two types of taxes that we get off property. One is the sales tax, and the other is the property tax. Property tax is probably equal because that's based on the value of the property and the structure on the property. Sales tax based on retail sales. So clearly, general commercial in the sales tax side is typically much higher than a light industrial type use. But property tax is probably even, or maybe in some cases even slightly towards the light industrial because the buildings tend to be a little more substantial. But,
okay, thank you.
Would personal property tax, though, with equipment inside the building, that would make is
That's
another
the light
tax
industrial with
revenue.
yeah.
and then just so I think you're aware, residential property tax is 40%. Is that right, or 60?
Yeah, there's an exemption on residential, so
So
they
it's
pay
automatically
40% of their
reduced
value.
to half.
Yeah.
Has this property been put with EDC Utah on their short sites? it has been?
Yes, it has been listed as a sure site for at least as long as I've been here, I believe.
Okay. How about DATC? I know they're building a new building in 2020. Would they ever have any use for something like that for expansion?
I'm not aware of the discussion that's been had on that, so I can't speak one way or the other on that.
Will you just explain the EDCU question and what the designation you're talking about?
Yeah, so EDC Utah is the Economic Development Corporation of Utah. It's a nonprofit entity, exists downtown Salt Lake, and they're essentially chartered a bunch of jurisdictions, the state, many businesses. It's an effort kind of statewide to collaboratively entice new business and growth of business within Utah. And so they're expert and really they're focused on attracting new businesses. So a component of that is they bring in site selectors all the time. So they have a list of designated sure sites, they call them. They've been pre-vetted as available, what type of utilities are there, sites that they'll show people. And so when they call it a sure site, this is one of those that's kind of been on that radar, I believe, for some time. So
not only I think the implication there is, and I think it's a pretty strong one, is not only maybe has America First been doing things, perhaps EDCU has said, well, not only perhaps, they have designated it now to the extent they've shown people it maybe is an unknown, but they've a separate entity has also been trying to bring in business for this property, and it's still been 7 years with nothing. That's at least my own interpretation.
And I can't speak on behalf of the current property owner, but Patrick Julin with CBRE is the current listing agent. They've had it for a few years. Again, it's been listed for 7 years. Over the last few years, in talking to Patrick, they have gone to great lengths to reaching out to their local and even national network to try to find a user that could fit here, and have had some real serious challenges. That's why I think they ended up reaching out to residential developers that like Ivory, that knew could get creative and were willing to take on the effort of coming up with a plan that's feasible in the marketplace.
I think that's why when we talk about potential taxes that we're going to lose from commercial, it may be another 10 years before we see any commercial tax revenue off this, if ever. If we leave a general commercial, it may never be developed. And so that, I mean, to me, it's kind of a moot point. Why are we arguing against a tax that we may never receive versus one that we would get potentially quickly, although it may be slightly less?
Would it qualify for RDA or ED? No.
Not currently in the RDA project area.
Okay, so I think that's been a helpful discussion, and thank you again for your help. Appears to me like we're kind of working towards a consensus. It seems to me like one concern is this other piece that was labeled general commercial that's going to be light industrial. I think that's one concern that's amongst us. And then just generally the question about whether this is the right kind of zoning for the area and for the opportunities that have. And my personal sense is that this is a pretty good compromise for what we'd like to see and what's realistic. I am concerned about the general commercial, and I'm tempted to recommend that stay off and remain general commercial with the next users to come in and make their case, and we can decide whether with that use, and we can forge a development agreement that would make sense to protect planning and yet still allow that to come in. But I'm open to either way. I think this is a pretty good compromise.
I would agree with that. One last question I have. This PRUD is for sort of this open space, maybe this private lane. Is that essentially why PRUD is being proposed?
Correct. It also allows a little bit more flexibility in how the lots lay out. So if it weren't for that, every lot would have essentially the same shape, frontage, and size. And also the alley load lots would not be feasible. We they have to have that private alley access, and the PRUD allows that type of development.
And I say this more for the residents than for you, because I know you know this, but the development agreement explicitly states that this is all single-family detached lots, so there is no attached twin townhome product. Knowing that the PR, I got a couple calls from residents saying, you told us all single-family homes, and now you're going with a zone that would allow twin homes, and that would be clarified in the development agreement.
Thank you. The alley doesn't count as the open space, does it?
No.
Okay.
It would not, no.
No, but it's a private lane that would be needed for a PRUD. PRUD is needed to get that.
Technically, the alley would not count as a private lane
Okay.
because they'll have access from public street.
Got it.
But it does need it for open space and some of the exemptions that Lyle stated in the introduction, side yards and that, you need the PRUD to accommodate those kind of things.
20 foot, the 5 foot.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that west and south corner of the green, that's going to be open so kids can run and play, and it's going to be fenced in and that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, we envisioned so you can say there a trail access from the neighborhood back to a tot lot, and
What you're calling it, a tot lot? Is that what you're
a
saying?
little playground.
Okay.
A little playground area could be used for a water. Stormwater detention facility, possibly. We haven't gotten into the engineering side, but either way, we see that as a great spot for some safe and enclosed open space area for the community, for dog walking and so on. We also, we've even kicked around the idea of possibly having the trail connection that loops in and around. So there is more pedestrian connectivity, but we haven't gotten that far yet.
Thank you.
I'll
Go
say
ahead.
something for just a moment.
Sure.
I'll take 3 minutes. My name is Paul Stringham, and I reside in the Salt Lake City area. I do develop self-storage. I would be that component on this longer rectangular piece. And the night is long, and I'll take 3 minutes only. And really, a decision certainly doesn't need to be made tonight on storage. But I'd echo some of your thoughts that the general commercial has just changed so much throughout the world, throughout this country. It has. I've been in the business for 38 years, and I've brought in the Costco's before and the Walmarts of the world, many grocery stores, and I own retail. And it has just changed so much. It's being redefined. Bricks and mortar is not dead, but it is certainly redefined right now. The challenge that you have on this piece of property, and you know this, I'm not telling you or teaching you anything you don't already know, is you've got about, on this rectangular piece, you've got about 300 feet of depth and about 275 feet of width. That's a great challenge for a retailer. And to find a retailer that's going to take that type of space with only one point of access in a residential area to consume about 50, 60,000 square feet is really, the odds are against you. You'll never find it. There's probably 4 or 5 retailers out there that are 30 to 50,000 square feet left in this country. And I'm not exaggerating. They're just not out there anymore. The access coming in off 200 North is also a great challenge. With social media today, you can get people into a site, but it's still a great challenge. Now, if I could just end on the storage component. There has been, as you know, a proliferation of storage throughout communities, municipalities, throughout the whole country. I get that and I understand that. And I'm part of it, though I'm slow moving. But the projects that I've been involved in and have developed have been very, very successful. And one that I have done most recently is in South Jordan next to Costco that I brought in. And it's called Think Storage. That's the name of our branding, and that's what we would like to do here. And I would just echo and just state the importance of management. I've seen the other facilities here in Kaysville. And I'm not speaking or being critical of them, but storage has evolved to an institutional type property. And that's the type of projects that we develop. I work closely with Extra Space, with Public Storage, who's the largest in the country, and they have great interest in the projects that we develop. And I'm not exaggerating when I say this. My managers are taught with the diameter of a piece of paper of my small little finger, if it's on a site, it is picked up. We're there from business hours, from opening to close. We don't take breaks. We don't put a note on that says, we're gone for a while, we'll see, please call us if you'd like. It's not that type of business. This is a very professional business. We develop a very nice product, very good-looking product. The community in South Jordan is very happy very happy with our product. And our traffic counts are 25 to 30, 32 cars a day. And it's quiet. That's what I think you would want in a community like this, especially with traffic going out on 200 North. I've taken my time. But I assure you that self-storage is and can be an institutional type product that is very attractive, that meets the needs of community. And we'd like to have an opportunity to do something in your city. We'd really like that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any questions out here?
Thank you. All right. Ready for a motion?
May I suggest, before you make a motion,
Don't want to rush into it.
Based on the information we've received tonight, we probably need to review the development agreement much closer and make sure the things that have been represented are adequately reflected there. So if you're inclined to approve the request in some fashion, regardless of what zone goes where, I would suggest that you make that subject to finalizing the development agreement before the zone is fully implemented.
I think that's a good suggestion. So I'm going to just try to, I'm not exactly sure where everybody is on this, but it seems like to me we're probably have a majority on okay with the residential and okay with Congo, and I'm not sure where we are on that last little piece. If I'm inclined to think that, well, personally, I think I would probably favor leaving that general commercial and have Mr. Stringham come back and be just as persuasive as you were today, and you'd probably get your LI at that point. But that's just my thinking. I don't know if
I mean, that's a good point, because apparently we don't have it for sure that Mr. Stringham's going to move ahead with the development there. I think he'd like to.
his evil twin who does crappy storage might come.
Andy, because we are simply making a recommendation to the council, if we recommend it stays general commercial, they can throw that out and make the whole
Sure.
thing light industrial?
Yeah,
Yes,
you bet.
yeah.
Well,
Could we be as generic as saying in our motion that the development agreement be modified to the extent necessary based on what was represented by either by Ivory or what we had suggested? Because I don't know that I couldn't go through and say, okay, here's what the development agreement currently says, and here's where we think it should have been changed. You know what I mean? I don't want to miss something that we.
Right. No, I wouldn't.
yeah, I think
not
Andy said
suggest
they'd
crafting a development agreement at a public meeting.
When would this go on the council agenda?
Typically in 3 weeks.
3 weeks. So we could have a chance to look at that development agreement in 2 weeks. Again.
And I think we've done this in the past. I think I could feel comfortable to have the staff work it towards where we've headed, and then
the council.
yeah.
Take over.
I mean, if time doesn't permit.
Yeah, but if it does, if it's 3
either way,
weeks
it's
before
appropriate.
it's on the council agenda, we could
Yeah.
look at that
I think that's
development
right.
agreement again and send it on.
I like the suggestion of keeping this general commercial, but leaving the development agreement open such that it could
You could
go back to LI.
just leave that.
Leave it off.
simply out of the
Leave it
language.
out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think just
Yeah.
bring it back.
Rezone.
Okay.
Rezone 20.
Right, but what I'm
Just
saying is
rezone
can we?
20
Because
acres from here and not even include this in a development agreement.
Okay.
Leaving it in general
Yeah.
commercial.
got it.
Then any
Yeah.
new proposal has to come back through the rezone process, and you have a chance to implement appropriate
Well,
conditions at that point.
Yeah, and whenever that happens, maybe the world's changed.
You don't know.
Internet's died, and we're back to brick and mortar. Who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Maybe.
Probably not. Okay, I don't usually like to make a motion, so as the chair, but I will if that's where we are.
Go for it.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, all right. I'll move that we recommend the rezone of not 25 acres,
Roughly 20.
less than 20 acres. As we've discussed, this final portion to the left be removed from the proposal, and that the R2 zoning district with the PRUD and the LI for the Congo parcel be rezoned. And instruct the staff to revise and look at the development agreement to ensure that it meets the concerns and conditions that have been discussed.
Yeah, I think we can go with that.
That wasn't my best.
If you get your second and other votes.
Second.
Aye.
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 I
Aye.
convinced me.
All right. Thank you all for your participation. It was very helpful. Okay. Wow.
So,
Got 8 more of those.
What's that?
8 more of those tonight.
And I thought we were going to, half of these we're going to talk on that one. Okay, next is, we should have a little break and stand up and stretch, but we won't. Next is item number 4, is that right? Wow.
correct.
Public hearing and preliminary plat approval for Orchard Ridge Estates subdivision.
I think many of you are aware that we've been reviewing this piece of property east of Highway 89 on the north edge of town. Post the summer, we've received an application for annexation. That's been reviewed. There's some infrastructure issues that have been being worked on throughout the summer. We've got those under agreement. So our developers now proposed a preliminary plat for this property. The annexation has not been completed yet, but they would like to, based on their dealings with the existing property owner, they would like to know that they have a project before they fork over the big cardboard check. The property owner's not willing to sign an agreement that would allow them to annex. So with those types of issues, they've asked for preliminary plat to be reviewed at this point, so that same night that they annex, they have preliminary plat approval, they have entitlements on the property, they're comfortable closing on the property knowing that they have a project based on all the other standard items that need to be done. So we've asked for preliminary plat approval recommendation from the Planning Commission tonight. Project, well, let me just add this before I go on. As you're aware, also, zoning is assigned with annexation. So this is currently unincorporated Davis County property under Davis County zoning regulation. When it's annexed to Kaysville, a zone will be applied to it. The annexation agreement indicates that they will do a development, or we would potentially permit a development that would be permittable in the R18 zone. They've now submitted the preliminary plat. We've gone through the review of it and found that it would actually meet all the criteria of R110 for the bottom areas. From here down, that area meets criteria for R110 under the open space PUD development. The larger lots at the top, there's 2 lots here, they're 17,000 square feet. The rest are well over 20,000. So that would meet the criteria for either R114 or split it at this line here and do R14 and R20. So again, the zone has not been applied yet. It will be applied with the annexation. But just so you understand where we're at on zoning. Again, this is This is proposed as a PRUD development. You can see the open space in green. The lots are between, well, the minimum lot size shown here is 6,000 square feet. Obviously, they have lots up here that exceed 3 acres. Even on the bottom part, the average lot size is up in the 8 to 10,000 square foot range, so they're not bad. They have asked for some modifications, which again is allowed under the PRUD, similar to what we talked about on the last development. They've asked for side yard reduction to 5 feet on one side and 8 feet on the other. They've asked for front yard setback reduction. R18 would be 25 feet. R110 would be 30 feet. They've asked for a 20-foot setback. These two sections of private road here and here, they have hammerhead turnarounds rather than a typical cul-de-sac. We've allowed those in other subdivisions. I've reviewed that specifically with the fire department. They're comfortable with it. This private lane here creates about 3 or 4 double frontage lots, which we typically don't like. We looked at alternatives for that. However, when they looked at it, the alternative we looked at was just pushing this road all the way through, because this is on a hillside. That made the road grade too steep. And then by the same token, even though they're double frontage lots, there'll be retaining walls on the back of these lots and somewhere between 10, 15 feet of elevation difference from where the home is to the road down below. So it won't be a typical backyard abutting a street. It'll be a backyard abutting a retaining wall that abuts a street. So the typical issues that you can have with double frontage are not as significant based on that.
Well, and is part of that just the aesthetics of it, of having a backyard on the road? Is that part of the?
That's partially, yeah.
And with this, we're going to have very little traffic, right? I mean,
that'll be very little
people
traffic
going there.
As it is a dead end road. So those items that I've just mentioned, staff is comfortable with those items. The one item that I think deserves a little more discussion, or that staff is less comfortable, on their public streets, they've only shown a sidewalk on one side of the road. Staff would recommend that we require sidewalk on both sides of the public streets. The private roads, they're not showing any on this one or the little one up front. And then they're showing public street ending here and then going a private road up the hill. They're showing a sidewalk on only one side there. I'm probably comfortable with this piece. But the public streets internally, I would recommend sidewalk on both sides. The one other issue that we should make sure we're all aware of, our ordinance says that you can have a permanent dead-end street of 600 feet. They've designed it so that up to the end of the public street is 600 feet, and they go almost another 600 feet to the end of the private road. So that clearly exceeds the normal limit. They have, the adjacent property owner has been involved to some degree. They've had a concept plan designed just so they could know how they could work in the future. You look really close, you can see that concept plan shows the road stubbing in at about this point right here. So that shortens the distance of the long dead end to about 800 or 900 feet. Again, I've reviewed that specifically with fire department, public safety. Based on the terrain that's there, that is a private road for the bulk of it. As you can probably imagine, those will be large, expensive homes up there. They expect that that piece of private road will probably be the first street in Kaysville that gets plowed. They were comfortable with that exception as well, based on the terrain and how it will be maintained and what will happen there, especially with the prospect of a road going in somewhere in this area when the adjacent property goes. In the meantime, there is a driveway that you can see here that accesses a couple homes clear up here. That can be used as an emergency second access to that area until that southern property develops. So this is just the preliminary plat. This is a public hearing. Oh, let me mention also, they've platted all these as single-family dwellings. They're working with a company that develops the patio home concept that we've seen here in town, the Hyde Park, new out on North Main. So the kind of 55 and older, they like to call them active communities. That's a builder they're currently working with that would build the bulk of the homes on the smaller lots. So it would be that general type of development. This is a public hearing for the preliminary plat, so we need to do that, unless there's any questions on the development.
Any preliminary questions?
Yeah, I've got a couple questions.
Before we do the public hearing?
Uh-huh. Okay. Is this, with the Highway 89 expansion, has that been taken into account on this?
Yes, it has. You can't read it, but this slot here is identified as to be dedicated to UDOT.
And so, but it fits to have the road access and everything the way they show it.
Yeah, they intend a frontage road through there. And again, then just like the last one, they've shown an open space buffer between that frontage road and the back of those homes.
Okay. Is the staff comfortable with a mix like this of public and private streets? It seems a little bit, seems tough. Just, to have such a mix, because, where does one begin and the other leave off? And some of them the city will plow and some of them they won't.
Under this configuration, we're comfortable with it. We have similar situations throughout town. The private streets, and this sounds bad the way I say it, but they don't go anywhere. They're just strictly access for those lots.
Right.
And so if they were, if this private street looped around and tied in here, and it was likely to be used by the public at large for normal travel, we would have concerns. But where it's just simply access to those immediate homes, we typically don't have that kind of problem.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, we'll open the public hearing then. If you are here to speak on this item, please come forward, state your name, and limit yourself to 3 minutes if you can. Thank you. I appreciate your patience.
Sure. My name's Shalay Trujillo, and I am with Compass Holdings Development. And we appreciate you reviewing our project tonight. We're thankful for the work that you do for our community, and also Andy and Lyle, who have been great to work with. We're very excited about this project. It has been a long process. It's been a ton of work. We've been working on it for over 2 years. And there is a few things that we wanted to point out that are related to this project and the history of it. We've worked extensively with the city, and we've done several revisions of the concept to get it to an acceptable point where, given the terrain and the Highway 89 and all of that. So first of all, we had several meetings with some of the neighbors to the south, and the neighbors expressed concern about building townhomes. So we listened to them, and we agreed not to build townhomes here. They suggested that we build detached single-family homes and possibly even an active adult community environment. So after listening to them and receiving their input, we have partnered with Ovation Homes, and we are proposing building single-level active adult homes that appeal to the 55 and older community. We feel like these kind of homes are needed, and that they would be appealing to the community. As you know, the baby boomers have grown up, and they're the largest generation in America, and they desire to live in smaller homes where they don't have much yard work and where they can live close to their family and their friends, and they want to retire in the communities that they've lived in. Second of all, I just wanted to remind you that we do have an annexation agreement with the city, which has been officially approved, and it allows for the R18 zone. It allows for 95 units. Our concept tonight has come in with less units, lower density, and a down zone from our annexation agreement. You may also recall that we're working with the city in relocating the water tank that has to be relocated on Highway 89. And you can see at the top that round circle, that's the proposed site for relocation. And we have paid the full design fee and for the design of the water tank, the geotech studies, the soil studies, and we are providing that land for the water tank. This total site outlined, for review, it has approximately 40.5 acres, and the overall density is 2.27 acres per unit, and it includes 2 existing homes there that will stay. So this is a pretty low density, especially compared to the Ivory plan that was just before us that was 12 acres and asked for 70 lots. Ours will be much less dense. And it's actually very similar density to the neighborhood that is just to the north of there. It's called Tanglewood. The Tanglewood subdivision has 70 lots on 31.2 acres, and it is it's where some of the people that are here tonight actually live. So the Orchard Ridge Estates is less dense than some of the areas on the east side of Kaysville that are under the R18 zone, and the open space there is shown in the green. It's 117,496 square feet, which is roughly 2.7 acres of open space. So anyways, that's just a little bit of information, and we're really excited to finally see this come together, and we're thankful that you'll review this tonight.
Great. Thank you very much. We're still in the public hearing, so please come forward if you'd like to make a statement.
Good evening. Thanks for your time, and you guys are warriors, marathon runners, I tell you. Thanks for once again taking the time. My name's Lance Munson. I live at 1298 North Highway 89. I'm part of the group that they have spoken with we're just south of this development. I wrote my stuff down because otherwise I get way off topic. It's not good. So anyway, I don't know how many of you have actually ever been up in this area or looked at this area, but I would definitely encourage you to do so before making any decisions, especially around 5 o'clock at night. Because they're looking at adding another 90 homes in this area. Let's see here, prior to voting, you average, say, 3 or 4 extra people per household. You're looking at 360 extra people stuffed in this little area over here. I believe the zoning should be R1 LD, which is residential low density, which means no more than 2 units per acre, which would be more like the Bronzefield development to the north and other homes and lots in the area. Where I live to the south, it was required to have 1 acre lots. High-density housing with small 6,000 to 7,000 square foot lots are not conducive or congruent to this area. The developer's proposed zoning is kind of misleading, in my opinion, because they are asking for the R110 PRUD overlay, which I believe means 4 homes per acre across the project, not per acre. So you have thus the 6,000 square foot lots on the lower west end of the plat, which could end up being 6 to 7 houses per acre. So they want to pile as many homes as they can on the lower part of the development and then have these huge lots at the top so they can claim they're still within the required zoning. What they are asking for is high density housing for a large portion of the development. And the builder can change the type of housing that goes in once they have the zoning. So they can put in potentially if they get the zoning, they can put in smaller, cheaper houses as long as they're within the zoning requirements. This type of development with high density housing will negatively affect our property values. I'm concerned about safety issues, traffic issues, negative effect on property values, negative effect on quality of life, lack of services, and the lack of infrastructure to support this type of development. And a retirement community right off of Highway 89, I just don't think it's the right area for it. This land has not yet been annexed. The county commissioner told the developer they needed to annex the entire unincorporated area if they were going to annex this land. Also, per state code, they cannot annex if they are going to create an island or peninsula of unincorporated land, which is what the area in which I live would be if they are if they were to just annex the proposed development area. So I don't know how the developer is getting around both the county commissioner and the state code. I believe you mentioned that the current property owner doesn't even agree to annexation. The current proposal is not the highest and best use for this land. I am not opposed to this area being developed, but it needs to be done right with the correct zoning and housing type. I strongly oppose this development as proposed, and I oppose the annexation of this area. Developer should hold an open house to get feedback and concerns from the property owners in the area. To my knowledge, there are no property owners that live in the area that approve of this project. Thank you for your time.
Great, thank you.
Hello, good evening. I'm Brad Frost. I'm the owner of Ovation Homes. I'll take a quick 3 minutes, try to, and give you, I think there's a lot of questions that I could answer for folks here and clarify maybe some misconceptions that were just said a little bit and make sure we are on the same page. So we're a company, Ovation Homes has been in business for about 18 years. We specialize in active adult communities. We've done them, we're the largest active adult builder in Weber-Davis County. We don't know a lot, but we know active adult, and we buy the ground, we develop the ground, we build on the communities, and we manage the HOA communities. And we eventually turn them over to the HOAs when they're ready to be turned over properly. And so we're really, really excited about this project because there are not many opportunities where you have east side properties that would allow to have one-level homes. These will have basements as well. But I want to give you kind of a synopsis of what we're dealing with. I'm going to give you a couple of thoughts. We have a project in West Layton, 112 units. I had my first phase open, 29 lots, sold out in a couple of months. All of my detached lots that would be considered here, we opened them up for a day, they were gone. We have a project in Valley View, just north of Valley View Golf Course. If any of you golf, you probably see the whole mountainside being moved. That's our project. Awesome project. We had 17 lots in the first phase. We had over 80 people on a waiting list. We had 33 lots in our second phase, and we had 124 people on that list. We just barely finished the asphalt. There's a lot of demand that people that are active adult want to have options, and there's not many options on the east side. A lot of folks, counter to the argument that was just made, we have a lot of folks that live in the subdivisions that are neighbors that would be interested in moving into something like this because there's nothing like it. It would be the best active adult subdivision on the east side that you'd find in Weber and Davis County. Some of our footages we have our homes are anywhere from 1,900 to 3,200 square feet on one level with a loft if they want to do that. They'll have basements on some lots. We figure about 40% of them will have basements depending on the terrain. Those will be anywhere from 4,000 to 5,500 square feet. As far as the values of our homes in Valley View, we're at a $470,000 to $800,000 price range, and we figure we'll probably be 10 to 20% higher in Kaysville. And so they're not inexpensive homes. They're very, very nice homes. We had a parade of homes in West Bountiful, and this last summer we were in the top 10 in the nation in the parade of homes. We had a CBS special that they flew out and did a 2-hour special on our project and on our home, and they've asked that they would be able to do that again next year because they loved it so much. We're on a national 22-minute spot on CBS in the spring, and all that is platforming into what we want to do on the East Kaysville Orchard Ridge Estates active adult project. All the lots will be maintained in the front. All the yards will be done. The HOA will maintain the private roads. They'll maintain the driveways for snow, weeds, grass. It'll be really, really nice, kept up, maintained, and very easy to, there won't be any problems as far as mixing private roads and public roads. And so hopefully if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to, we have some pictures if you'd like to see them. If you have any questions as far as what it would look like, I'd be happy to answer those questions.
Okay, great. Thank you. Let's continue with the public hearing.
I apologize for the hat and flip-flops. I thought I was coming to this little board meeting. So Brittany Starnes, myself and my husband, Adam, we actually have the property just right to the side of this development coming in, and we have the road that they're talking about alongside our property that is private, connecting up to the top of the property they're wanting to develop, of which we actually are the ones that clean and snow remove on that road. So for them to think that that's going to be utilized for an emergency access, it depends on us as neighborhoods to make sure that that's plowed. I am absolutely against that many homes going in. We purchased that land after building 4 homes, living back to back with neighborhoods like that. Spent a significant amount of money to bring our children up in a place where we could be in more of a country feel. We have a little pumpkin patch that we have right along Highway 89 where families can come and choose pumpkins and those kind of things. And we keep it very family oriented. When we had spoke, the developers have been at our home and had spoke to us about what this might look like. And when I saw this plat with this many homes, I about fell off my chair. It's very far from what we spoke about. They mentioned it was going to be, single family homes. Yes, I did understand that, but to be packed in like that in a significant way is going to impact that entire neighborhood. We just live, basically next door to, and our home and the value of our home is significantly impacted based on this development going in. I also was opposed to being annexed into Kaysville. I wanted to remain unincorporated Davis County, and that's kind of been forced for me because I've been told that I'm just the little piece of landowner down here, and the majority is that big land that wanted to be developed above us. So we are sandwiched in between a lot of forced decisions in my mind, and I would like it to remain the way that it is. Of course, I understand change is what it is, but as a mom who purchased a lot for the environment that I was hoping it would stay at, I didn't ever imagine it would be of such that this plat is showing. So with that, that's all I have. Thank you.
I have a quick question, sorry. And maybe Lyle, can you give her a pointer? Because will you explain the snowplow thing you talked about?
There is one up there now that's...
I'll just So we have, this is a UDOT piece, rental house that's right here, and this is our home here. Our driveway, we actually, the owners that we purchased this home from, we left a 50-foot piece of property, which is right here, from our end of our property to a fence line, and this road runs up to these other homes here. This part is grassed, an area of our yard. Our driveway comes out here, and then there's a very small piece that nearly a fire truck, including our landscaping, can hardly make it up that road. I don't think if you put a fire truck up today, they could hardly make it up that road. We plow amongst the neighborhood up here. There's a person up here that owns a truck, his personal truck, and is plowing this road down, piling the snow in our driveway right here, which allows us every snow season and every winter to have to plow, pushing it down on the frontage road here.
Okay.
That answered my question. Yep.
Thank you.
Andy, is all of that property to the south there being annexed as well?
Yeah, what's shown on this map is all proposed to be annexed. Let me go back to the aerial. This is the project area that's outlined. You can see the black line, that's currently Kaysville. The annexation is proposed to come to here. We reviewed this with the county. Initially, we thought that all this would have to come in. The county said that they would allow this little connection across 89 to count and not make that an island, and they said they had no problem with it.
What I view as myself as the island in between the property that they're annexing and the other that they're not. And that's where you're seeing some of these neighborhood folks expressing their concern as well.
So, Andy, why are they annexing that long strip between them if they're leaving that other island? Does that make sense?
You're saying this...
Yeah, why is that big piece being annexed in?
That property owner signed the petition.
Oh, okay.
Except for Brittany, right? Brittany, you're like right here?
Yep, I'm down below.
There were two parcels down below and then the big parcel.
There's a parcel that UDOT's owned. It's an abandoned house right next to me, actually. It used to be rented, but I'm to the other side.
So why isn't theirs? So can't theirs be excluded from the annexation? If there's still something, I mean, there can.
So you're saying like this would be county, and then they're still county, but this is Kaysville.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I just
that could, yeah.
But what would that do for Brittany?
Well, they're saying they didn't want to be
do
part
anything
of the
about themselves.
Right.
Yeah, that's right.
No, but I mean, and again, tonight we're not talking about the annexation.
Right.
But
yeah, that's
just trying to understand. Okay. Yeah. Thank you for your time. Anybody else? Going once? Oh.
Good evening. My name is Jenny Dobb. I'm a homeowner in the Tanglewood subdivision that is just to the north of this proposed development. And I would like to thank the developer for their time and effort that they've put into this. I know they're passionate about their project. And as Mr. Munson said, I concur with a lot of the things that he stated. As a property owner, I think our big concerns are not against development, but again, the low density at the end of this, at the beginning of the subdivision. I moved to this subdivision in, I think it's been 12 years now, in the Tanglewood subdivision. And although my lot is, I believe, I didn't pull it up beforehand, but I believe a little bit bigger than these proposed lots, I purchased that home specifically because of property value and the area that it's located in. All of the homes surrounding this area are of the same nature, and we would like to see property values maintained. I am a fan of Ovation Homes. I have parents who would be, although they wouldn't be able to purchase a home in this area, I see a need for this type of home. But again, it's the lot size that I think we all have a problem with. And if, you know, they've done a great job to listen to some of our concerns before and remove the townhouse home option, but it's still not where it needs to be for this area. As they've said from both Ovation as well as Chalet, and again, appreciate all of their dedication to this project. You know, these are homes that are desirable. This is one of the only pieces of property, you know, with the exception of the Talbot property, which is further south down Highway 89. You know, there's not homes available or land available for development in this area. So I think that we do, as abutting property owners, have you know, this opportunity to express these major concerns, and we hope that will be listened to. We hope that there can be a compromise so that they can move forward with this project that they're passionate about, but it also respects the area that they're choosing to develop. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Fred Nichols. I live in Tanglewood as well, and basically adjacent to her lot. And I'd just like to add what little bit of gravity I have to what Lance Munson said, and Jenny as well, that we're really concerned about the property values. And actually, even though this will be Kaysville, it's much closer to downtown Layton. I would assume that most of the traffic in and out of there will head north on the new access road, right through the traffic pattern with Layton and with Braunfels, and will create additional burden on what would hopefully have become an easy access through the new Highway 89 development. It's regardless of what you call it, whether it's high density or low density, you're adding 95 homes to an area that essentially you're doubling the impact on the community in a very limited area of highway frontage. And it's going to be congested at best, and who knows what impact that's going to have on our property values in the long run. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Thank you. My name's Chris Trujillo. I'm with a developer. So I appreciate the concerns of the neighbors that we've heard. Just a couple things I'd like to clarify. A statement made that the current landowner hasn't signed the annexation petition. That's not true. Current landowner has signed the annexation petition, and also the two existing homeowners that live there, they've also signed the annexation petition. The other statement that was raised that the other area needs to be annexed as well as this portion that we're looking at annexing. We've dealt with that issue already multiple times with the county. The county held a meeting to address it. They had, based on a statement from Mr. Munson, they had actually objected the annexation petition. They filed an objection, but they've met as a body. County commissioners addressed that issue. They withdrew their objection, and we have that. I think Lyle has that document he could share with the Planning Commission if you're interested in receiving in looking at that. We believe that the value of the property should at least be maintained, if not increased, based on a development like this. We're looking like Brad said that there'll be very quality homes that we think will attract a good population base. And then the other point about traffic, we understand Highway 89 is congested, and but the other thing that should be considered is active adult communities typically have about 60% less traffic than traditional families, just because the nature of usually it's one or two people living in that type of home rather than 4 to 6, something like that. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Ina Gold. I live on 1352 North Highway 89. We're south of the development plus the part that might be annexed. My concern, I love the idea of the homes for older people because I'm older. I'm 71. I'm out on that highway all the time. I'm sorry. Maybe they don't drive as much, but all of my neighbors are out there driving up and down and up and down. I appreciate that they've listened to us. I have basically 3 concerns. Property values. I'm concerned about already we have a business up there, and they're going to take some of our business, obviously, for the frontage road. I'm looking at Highway 89 and trying to get onto that road, and it's impossible in the morning and in the afternoon, evening. In fact, it was 7 o'clock tonight. It was still busy. I'm worried about the frontage road that they're going to put in being able to handle that many more homes and that much more traffic, because that's all we're going to have. We're going to have the frontage road to go north to try to get on the freeway or to go south to get down into Kaysville. So I guess basically I was worried about annexation because we're against it. I'm worried about the frontage road being able to handle the increased traffic load. I'm concerned about the high density of the homes as well and the impact the traffic's going to have. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much.
So my name is Dwight Rigby. We have a home that borders just on the north of Brumsfield, just overlooking this area. And I guess my concern is that we seem to have a penchant, feel a need to build on top of one another. In this corridor, 9 miles up and down Highway 89, particularly on the east side, has been typically orchards. It's been open space. It's had a certain benign pastoral orchard type of feel to it. And this is the only piece of it that would become relative high density. Now, you can average, but that's very misrepresentative. If you look at the homes on Brumsfield, on the north part of this proposed development, those lot sizes are significantly different than the higher density houses that are built shoulder to shoulder with no yards. And of course, the upper part, if you average that in, then you meet the magic number, but that's, like many statistics, just misrepresentative. And the character of this is just disproportionate. It's not fitting with, the feel that most of us moved up here for. I mean, I moved up here 34 years ago, and it was much different then. We actually had a lake to look at. I know things changed. We're not opposed to development, but this, I think, is out of character. And we have to think about in terms of where we live and what we want to look at and see if we can't maintain, some feel. And Kaysville is different than Layton in its feel in the downtown. It actually looks like it's got a history. It's got a feeling. And so does that part of the corridor. And I think it ought to be maintained as such. Thanks.
Great. Thank you very much. Anyone else?
My name's Delin Yates,
I wished everyone would speak into this mic. I'm hard of hearing. Sorry. I'm the developer of Bromsfield. That's the piece north of this. And at the time I did that, I worked with the Frost family here. And I think that this group of developers that have been looking at this have gone through and methodically tried to work with the city to do a planned development, and that it works out, and it works nicely because we have higher lots up on the top, but the lower ones, if you did an overlay on that, I think that that you would find that there's plenty of open space and comparable to other homes in the area. The interesting thing about this is that we focus on this, and we have a tendency to isolate this little thing. This whole area down here is going to be developed eventually, and there's going to be homes there. There's problems with getting across the freeway, but I think that as construction comes in and we get the overpasses and so on and so forth, and the exits and the on-ramps and so forth, I think that's all going to alleviate itself. That'll take a couple of years, but I think that will work. I would like to ask Matthew Yates if he would come and address the issue of values. I've been in development and selling and buying property and developing residential and commercial properties for many years. And I tell you that that's not true, that your values are going to drop. I've heard that since 1980. And I've never seen an area where the values have dropped. And generally, the appraisers handle that according to what their appraising guidelines are, and you don't have that problem. I think, if anything, this will enhance that.
Thank you.
Matt Yates with Compass Holdings Development. A few of the comments I'd just like to address is one was about that, if we got the zone, we could just go and build however many we wanted. And that's not true. We have an annexation agreement that limits us to the specified amount, and actually we're under that number. 90, someone said 95, we're actually at 90. So the other thing is I would like to address is, it does have the different size lots throughout. Some have focused on the 6,000, but if you went in through and looked at the different size lots, there's all different sizes throughout the whole subdivision. 2.7 acres of open space. You could easily throw that into lots and have the size go up, but it just makes more sense with the product type and the target market. We feel like this is what they want, is the home on a smaller lot, maintained. Smaller yard means less yard work, but that's all I had.
Great, thank you. Anyone else before we close the public hearing?
To the issue of property value, I think it's more than a number. It's about a feel, as Mr. Rigby said, and it's about what you want within that community. And because we will, even after the highway completion or the highway project is completed, we will still only have that one frontage road. We will not have overpasses. We have to connect over to Oak Hills Drive, or we have to go down to Second North. We do not have another option. That frontage road is it. And the only issue I think the majority of us have with that is the low density on the front end of the project. But again, appreciation to the developers. We want to compromise. It's just not right yet.
Great, thank you. Okay, we're going to close this hearing if we keep on having repeat people. Okay,
Sorry,
go ahead.
I just wanted to make it clear that the only people that have agreed to annexation are people that don't live there. It's the Frost, she lives down in Salt Lake, and Dean Story, who's the finance director here at Kaysville City. Those are the only two that have agreed to annex that I'm aware of.
Thank you. Okay. We're going to close the public hearing unless there's anyone else. Okay. we'll close the public hearing. Thank you for your participation.
I have a question, just so I can understand. So these roads that are on the sides, are those stubbed, or will there be access roads on each side of the, for the top and the bottom? Or are those
Currently,
just stubbed
obviously,
roads?
there's the access at the bottom.
So right
there's a
there.
tie-in here and here from the subdivision that's in Layton.
Okay.
There's a stub road here to the south that matches their concept plan, and a connection here that matches the concept plan for that property.
So the road to the south won't actually be a road until that development goes in?
That's correct.
Okay.
But is that going to, like I see that one, but that's further west stubbing, but is that one at the top, the east, is that going to stub out? I mean, in other words, kind of force that a road comes there?
Yes.
Okay. So the developer to the south will have to connect to that road?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah. And again, they've been working with that property owner to make sure that they're, at this point, to serve this area with utilities, they have to cross this property. So before this property would allow utilities to cross it and give up the easement, they wanted to make sure that easement was where the road was going to go.
I see.
So they have worked to make sure they had a concept plan that they were comfortable enough with that they could locate the easements in an appropriate place so it would accommodate future development of that parcel.
Okay, thank you.
Did you close the public hearing?
I did.
Okay.
You want to open it back up?
No. I mean, I think we've heard from everyone, but so I don't know if it's possible, and if it's not, then so be it. And I don't know that it's entirely relevant, but I'm just curious. Can the staff weigh in on the dispute about who has signed or not signed, or do you know?
I know that we have, off the top of my head, I don't know who signed and who hasn't.
Okay.
I know that we have a valid petition.
Yeah.
Which meets the criteria established by the state. If I'm remembering correctly, 51% of the property owners and
It's a valuation number, so they have to
valuation
have
percentage
majority.
of the valuation of the property included. So even though the property is 40 acres, its value compared to a 1 acre with a home on it, the intent is that it's weighted so that everybody has kind of an equal vote in the petition. And we did have a valid annexation petition for what's proposed to be annexed.
Can you show a map that shows the city boundaries? And
I pulled up a zoning map. The zoning map showed the city boundaries. That's where I got the question about what properties were being annexed.
Hopefully the boundary will come on in just a second.
Yeah.
It is a little hard to see.
While you're finding that, can I ask Compass, what have you done for public outreach? It sounds like people know what's going on. Did you send out flyers or have an open house or?
It's been over a year that we met with a lot of the neighbors in the county, because originally, we had in this room we had 4 or 5 meetings when opened them to the public and had members of the city there and received their input on what they would like to see, and that was the meeting where they were just like no townhomes. That was really the big thing that they wanted. Again, 2.2 units per acre is where we're at, and it was suggested that can you do a senior type product with single level? That was brought up. So
you did have citizens and or neighbors at that meeting?
Yes.
Do you know, like, just ballpark where they were from, or did you know?
Yeah, sure. The majority of them live in this little area down to the south, right there.
There is a pointer up there.
Right here?
Right. Let's see. Yes, right in there. They were all invited in the county.
What kind of notice was given? How was the invitations extended? All that kind of stuff.
I think emails, calls, spread the word.
Mm-hmm. And just for the interest of the Planning Commission, we've been involved in seeing some of those meetings, but in addition to that, this is new to the Planning Commission, but through the annexation process, we've had multiple public hearings and meetings on this because it was both necessary to revise our annexation policy plan, then the actual annexation consideration. So again, I don't want all the specific signatures and everything, but it has qualified as met. It's been approved and okayed by the county. And there have been additional meetings outside of any efforts, which Matt could speak to, but that have been before the City Council because that's where the process lies.
Right. So looking at this map, that dark red is Kaysville?
Yes, sir.
The side of it. And then the part we're talking about is it's a block up where those, yeah, that's it right there.
Here.
And those two lots in the middle are existing homes? Is that what, the inside, yeah.
Right there, there's two existing homes, yes.
Okay.
I think it needs to be pointed out also that a lot of the comment are from the Layton side, which is Bromsfield, Tanglewood, Twin Peaks. Those people that were not involved in the meetings we had originally.
Yeah.
So, sure.
Yeah.
Oh, I just had a question on the sidewalks. Just said that sidewalks are only on the public streets, no private sidewalks on the private streets.
You know, the sidewalk on one side of the private street, right?
Currently is shown
Kinda confused.
there's sidewalk on one side of the public street and no sidewalk on the
But
private
on
streets.
these hammerheads, there's no sidewalk.
That's correct.
Those are the private lanes.
Okay, so no sidewalks on those.
On those, just right.
Is there a reason for that, just because space or?
That's what was proposed. I would ask them to address that.
Just some help. We've done this several times in different projects.
Mhm.
There's a couple theories. There's a theory of the mountain you'll see lots of subdivisions that have, because of terrain, just one sidewalk on one side. But we also, with our active adults, you know, they would rather have green space, sidewalks where they can walk up and down on one side is ample. Most of them actually like to walk in the street. It's a very active community. It's safe. There's not a lot of crazy drivers. And certainly we'll work with staff, and it's not something that we would be a deal killer for us, but it just, as a community, flows better from an active adult perspective.
Okay.
I have a question. Can you go back to the plat? Will you? So this somewhat relates, actually maybe directly relates to the concerns over property values, and if you can answer, if you have an idea, even if it's in the ballpark, what price points are you looking at for these units here?
So I addressed that a little bit with our Valley View, which is on the west side, just north of Valley View Golf Course. And I've been an appraiser for 23 years as well. I mean, I know values. I know what that means. I've heard it before. And if an appraiser goes in and appraises an active adult home and then goes to Bakersfield, or what's it, Broomsfield? Bromsfield. I was close. That's in California, right?
Yeah.
But an appraiser's not going to compare
Right.
an active adult to a residential single family, so it just doesn't have any validation at all in the real market. in the real world. Second part of that is I would say that on a price per square foot, our active adult homes are 20 to 30% higher than what you would see in the marketplace, because they're buying more than a home. They're buying a community. They're buying everything being completed, landscaping. They're buying who they're going to live by. So, answer your question, Valley View are $475 on a one level that's 1,900 square feet. We have them as high as $800,000 with basements. You know, our projections here are going to be probably $500,000 to $800,000 to $900,000, and I would suspect that on the houses up in those ranges, the upper end houses there, the developers wouldn't have us come in if it was going to affect those values, but I would look at those being to $1.2 to $2.5 million on the homes above. So the value component just isn't comparable. So,
thank you.
Okay, so on the note of property values, can I just make a comment? So, and Andy and Lyle can attest, I think, to this. Separate and apart from this discussion, I didn't know what was going to be said. I didn't know property values were going to come up necessarily, but it comes up all the time. Rezones, plats, what have you, property values always gets bandied about as being negative, and it's always anecdotal. I understand the concern, but I reached out to Andy and Lyle, again, separate from this, and I said, because we get that concern so much, can we get someone who can come in, an appraiser from the Kaysville business community, maybe a realtor or both, and explain to us how they value both appraised value and market value, and we can then have an idea when this thing comes up, that this comment about property values comes up all the time, we can then maybe have a basis to analyze the claims. And again, I understand the comment, but both the way I just very basically understand appraisals work, you look at comparables. You don't really necessarily look at surrounding neighborhood unless it's something like a residential up against a very stark differing land use, like an industrial use or something like that. That might weigh in. But that looks to me that sounds like it would add more. Or it would weigh more on market value as opposed to appraised value. And so in a situation like this, personally, I guess reasonable minds can differ on this. Personally, the property value claim doesn't hold water to me, because I really don't think $500,000 to $800,000, if we're just talking in the active living component, is going to negatively affect the surrounding properties. That's just my own opinion. Again, you all can differ on that, but that doesn't hold a lot of water. Now, the other thing that does maybe hold a little more water, and this is a subjective thing, is the character of the neighborhood. And maybe when people say property values are going to be negatively affected, what they're really saying is the character of the neighborhood. Now, that's a different issue in my mind, but that's entirely subjective. All of us might have a different opinion on what character is good or bad, but the more objective measure of property value and market value, it just doesn't hold any water for me.
Well, and I think to echo, I mean, I would agree with you on that. In the 38 years I've been doing this, doesn't matter what kind of development it is or what's proposed, usually always property values comes up as an issue. And I think a lot of it, as you say, going to the character, I think a lot of it just has to do with the fact that vacant property is being developed. You know, I think if people had their druthers, they'd rather see it not developed at all. But understanding that it is going to be developed, and then it's a question of what kind of development. And so there's usually always a dispute over that. And a lot of times it really boils down to it. We just rather not see it developed at all. And that's oftentimes just not realistic, because we are in an area that's growing, and private property does have the ability to be developed as other property has been, and it's a matter of trying to accommodate that development as best we can.
Wow. I agree. I do think that part of what we it's kind of a strange situation because this feels like a rezone, but it's not. It's the preliminary plat approval. But I think part of what we're tasked to look at is how this fits in with the neighborhood and the feel. And that, to me, I think, to your point, Josh, property values is not the same question as whether this is the right kind of development for this area. And I think, personally, I'm concerned about the 6,000 square foot lots. That's small. I think this is a nice development. It's going to improve and it's going to look nice. But that's a concern I have. And my question, maybe I need to read through the materials more, but how many of these lots are in that 6,000 range? You said 90 lots. I think the annexation agreement allows for 95, so you're below that. Do you have any sense? You don't have to be exact. Are we talking?
It looked like 70 of the lots.
70 of the lots.
That's what I can.
So my name is Cam Preston. I'm with Ensign Engineering.
Uh-huh.
So we have in the phases where we've done the clustering, and I was just going to pull this up. We have 76 lots on the lower half that, I mean, they're as low as 6,000, but those 76 lots. Sorry, I'm just trying to pull back my calculator. Those 76 lots are on just about 1 million square feet. So really the average square footage, if you incorporate the open space, is just over 12,000 square feet. And part of the reason why, I mean, the PRD zone is really intended to allow you to cluster because of site constraints. And with this being a hillside development, I mean, a lot of that green space, there's some site constraints that don't allow for development. So we're trying to cluster in order to do those things. And then the other thing I wanted to touch on was the sidewalk. Typically, like especially in the upper areas, because you're going and you're putting a 50-foot wide road on a hillside, you really run into some challenges where you're trying to put a flat space across something that has 10 feet of fall across it. So a lot of times we ask, a lot of cities have a hillside ordinance that allows for a sidewalk on one side. So particularly up in this area, you'd have a driveway that would come from the high side. This is very similar to the Twin Peaks area, where the driveway would come in and cut down on the side. And the reason you do that is just so that you don't have that additional sidewalk with so few lots on a road just creates the park strip is another 10 feet that you're trying to put flat on a hillside. Okay. So that's one of the considerations that we're asking for is for those areas of reduced sidewalk. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
I have a question about the cul-de-sac. So when this connects in there, this from this stub to the end here, setting aside the private versus public consideration, that is approximately how far, Andy?
From the cul-de-sac to the cul-de-sac is 600 feet.
From there to there?
Yes, and I think from the middle cul-de-sac down to the connecting road is also 600 feet. So that's, in my view, just a tinge past half. So you're somewhere in the 800 to 900 foot range.
And just out of curiosity, was there never a discussion about connecting this here instead of here?
That was looked at with, there's an existing home here and an existing home here. When this property did their layout, it didn't provide anything bringing a road up.
Yeah.
They looked at tying in here and then possibly taking lots off that cul-de-sac.
Okay.
When we planned that area, when you look at this area right here, because of the way it's already subdivided, by bringing a road in, it essentially, if we were to bring the road up and tie here, it just, the road, as we try to clip this corner and bring a road up, we effectively just eat that entire area up just to make that road connect.
Mm-hmm.
That's why, just in order to, the layout we came up with, he was looking to do, I mean, just there was two big, large lots right here is really what he wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why we didn't go. And in fact, at one point we pushed this further back just to help accommodate the neighbor to the south.
So Andy, I guess let me walk through this. Where does the requirement come in the code for 600-foot maximum,
Both in
cul-de-sac
our
or whatever it's called.
Standard drawings, and I believe it's also listed in Title 19 under subdivision improvements.
Okay, so what we're doing, and I know you've talked to the fire department, you said we're varying that. Is that correct?
I think I'm trying to be careful here because in this context, variance has a strict meaning.
Right.
And this is not that.
And explain that. And explain why.
Under our PRUD ordinance, it allows for modifications to normal standards in the underlying zone. And that's about how precise it says it. It doesn't get very specific. But
and that is a city ordinance.
Yes.
So were there no PRUD, we would be talking variance. Is that what I'm hearing?
There's no PRUD, then that would not be allowed.
Right. Okay.
Generally, we don't grant variances for new development.
Or anything that they choose.
Doesn't meet the criteria.
Yeah, right. Right. Okay. So I guess we have to, just let me finish that. We have to decide if we're comfortable with, in effect, doing something that is different with respect to that cul-de-sac.
And we're allowed to because of the PRUD.
Right.
Yeah. Yep. But what we have to say is, why do we want 600-foot cul-de-sacs to begin with in any other development outside of a PRUD? What are those considerations? And the fire department has weighed in. Are we comfortable with recommending that be varied? I'm not saying, again, where I'm at. I'm just saying we have to answer that question.
We just didn't we just talk about this 600-foot on the Blooming Grove thing a couple
with
times
the flag
ago?
lot discussion? It's kind of come up with the
times,
planning
right?
commission. Is
And
you had to draw a line in the sand somewhere.
Yeah, 600
so,
feet was just what we just decided.
Fairly arbitrary.
We talked to the utility people and we talked to the emergency people, and they felt like it was manageable.
Yes.
In that circumstance.
That's correct.
Well, and you're also trying to encourage, and you're thinking, a lot of times when you're thinking about these kinds of standards, you're on the flat, right? And you don't really want long streets that dead end, because that kind of ruins the connectivity.
Yeah.
You could have a lot of traffic that would be on that dead end street. People can get lost. They can go a long ways down the street and all of a sudden realize, oh, heck, we're on a dead end street. Accidentally the fire truck goes down the wrong street and they can't get out of there without turning around and going. There's a lot of reasons why you want to kind of limit the length of your streets. If for no other reason that it's a grid pattern, it'd be ideal, because that allows for maximum connectivity and a lot of different ways to go. But that's not always possible. But you try to limit how long you really allow those streets to be for a lot of those reasons.
And that's not as much of a concern here, because that's a destination. I mean, there's no other.
Right, and we're on a hillside, which has its issues and concerns, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Could you connect the deepest cul-de-sac to the, I guess is that Tanglewood, or is that?
Over here, you're saying?
Right there.
That's too steep.
It's too steep.
It'd be almost 20% grade.
A sledding hill.
Yeah, but that would be only for a road only.
That's why it goes on the long angle, so it can go kind of parallel
Across
to the contour and increase the altitude gradually.
Yeah.
Or more gradually.
Could you reopen public discussion for 3 minutes? We had a disproportionate input from the developers and engineers.
I don't think we need. I don't agree with that. But if you want to come up again and make another statement, we're okay with that. At least I'm okay with it.
So maybe what hasn't been appreciated
So
here
let it be
is
ready.
that we are friends and neighbors of the same community here, whether we're in Layton or Kaysville. So all of Tanglewood, all of Bromsfield, all of the proposed development, all of the area south of that, we're in the same ward. Same LDS ward, go to church together, we associate together, talk together, communicate together. It's community. It has a certain character. It's east of the highway. There's a reason why high-density housing isn't east of the highway. I mean, it's just a little kind of, you know, its own environment that lends something, contributes something to the feeling of Kaysville and to this area. And we don't want, you know, 10-lane freeways built through the middle of it. And we don't, you know, there's a place, there should be a place for quality of life, a little serenity, a little space. And this is an island of high-density housing. Picture's worth 1,000 words. You know, you look at that. There's clear, you know, much increased density here. It's out of character. I mean, whether we're in Layton or whether we're in Kaysville, you know, we're friends and neighbors, and it'd be nice to maintain the character for which we all move and live here. I would challenge you to find one homeowner on Layton or Kaysville bordering this that is in favor of this kind of development. We all realize that development is going to occur, but we'd like to have a little bit better character to it. If they were all lots the same size as the, you know, as the eastward, you know, 40% of that development, it'd be different. But this is high density. I'd like to have it respected. You know, at what point in time do you listen to the people who live there? I mean, it's the Kaysville City Council and the developers, basically, with a little bit of input from a little pocket of neighbors. You're supposed to be representative of the people.
Thank you.
Just FYI, we've actually had people contact us to build for them in this community that are neighbors in there. So that's from firsthand of people in the same ward and neighborhood. And I would bet that there's probably 25% of the people there that would probably, of our community, that will live and come there from neighboring subdivisions. So
I'm sorry, we couldn't hear that. Could you say that again? We couldn't hear it at all.
Not relevant.
His comment was that there were neighbors that were interested in that development. Okay, we're not here to debate that, though.
Yeah.
We're not here to debate whether Kaysville's changing. It is. It's going to be developed. We do take seriously the fact that you are our neighbors. We all live in Kaysville. We don't live next door to this like you do, but we try and be representative whenever we can of the people that live next door. But there are also rights of property owners to develop their land within certain restrictions that we as a community have set. If those restrictions are something that you don't agree with, then, you know, when we work on our general plan, please come and give us your input. But it's not going to stay the wilderness that it is right now. It was mentioned before, neighbors want to keep it to be 25 vacant acres or 40 vacant acres or whatever it might be. It's just not going to. You do lose that character. You lose that intrinsic value of where you're at, but we're not in the country anymore. When you moved here 30 or 40 years ago, you lived in the country. You live downtown now. Sorry to tell you that, but that's kind of what it's become. So we're not oblivious to your desires. We're not cold-hearted. We're not trying to make things difficult for anyone that is a neighbor of this. We're trying to get a good development and a good use of this project. And I miss Stroh.
Well,
He's more eloquent when it comes to that.
I was just going to say, we also need,
Forceful.
not that this is affordable housing necessarily to a lot of people, but we do need diverse housing. And I think that this supports that need, and also it is part of our plan, general plan, to have diverse housing options.
Well,
So-
and conversely, I think one of the characters of many communities that are cited is diversity. Rather than all being developed the same, that there's some diversity.
Right.
And that it adds character and strength to a community, and that's kind of the flip side to that as well. So it's kind of a balancing act.
Yeah, but we understand where you're coming from, so I will say that I know that these communities are nice. They're nicely done. I don't live in them, obviously, or even know someone that does, but I do know that they do a good job. So it's not as though you're going to be next door to, you know, something else.
Well, as I try to take notes here, it seems like we have maybe number one concern, or at least a major concern, is the density. And then we've talked about cul-de-sacs, or the length of the cul-de-sac, I guess I should say. And then I don't know if sidewalks are still a concern, but that was another one. Are there other, I mean, is that
Well, I think they've expressed a concern that they feel they haven't been heard, right? You haven't had an opportunity to fully express your opinions and in an open forum. So,
well, I hope tonight covers that. We've spent a good amount of time listening, and I think we've heard it. It's the other concern that was related, and I think Josh addressed it, which is this property values question, and that's something that I'm going to ignore and focus on the density thing, because I think that's very similar concern, and that one I think is more measurable, more quantifiable.
And then we're also not the last step.
True.
We're making a recommendation, and the final decision will be made by the City Council.
True.
After, I'm sure, listening again to the issues.
And on that note, I'll also say we as planning commissioners are appointed. We are not elected, and so in theory, at least, we are supposed to be able to cut through the political considerations and just look at what we think is the best decision. And you can. We're not a representative body, I guess. In addition to that. So you can make all the same arguments that you've made to us, to the City Council. I think the comment about it being a one community is a very good comment on one hand. On the other hand, if I'm playing devil's advocate, and I don't know if this is what the developers did consciously or subconsciously or what have you, but from a purely political standpoint, the only people that they need to have on their side are the voters of Kaysville, because that's who the City Council is beholden to. So, you know, I guess strategic decision or not, I don't know, but that's the reality of what we're dealing with. That doesn't mean that I agree it should be maybe a community-based decision, but in terms of representative body and voters and that, citizens of Layton don't have any sway in voting for City Council members in Kaysville, unfortunately. For those in Layton. So, you know, I think that it should maybe ideally be a community thing, but it's unfortunately not.
I have a question for Andy and Lyle. The agreement, I guess, that's been struck at this point for the annexation of the property indicated up to 95 units.
Yes, sir.
Who was that agreement made with? Was that made by the City Council?
The City Council approved that agreement, yes.
It's hard to figure how you're going to get 95 units on this property without the kind of lot sizes that you're getting.
Right.
So to that point, that agreement has been approved by the City Council. It provides for up to 95 lots. It also provides for R18 zoning, and I believe it provides for PRUD zoning as well. So really what we're looking at tonight is the preliminary plat. The density has been somewhat determined.
Okay.
Even without the PRUD, if they did all those lots at 8,000 square feet, which when I looked at my math, that's the average lot size of those smallers is over 8,000.
Right.
So you equal the 6s and the 12s, and you end up with 8,000 through the whole thing. It's still just as dense.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying, and I like that you brought it up. I would say, however, that even if the City Council has suggested or indicated that they're okay with up to 95, I don't think that necessarily means we ought to say, well, great, we rubber stamp that. I think if we look at it differently and say, well, look, we think 90 is way too much, then I think we make that recommendation, forward it on to the City Council, and they'll do what they'll do. But like Josh said, we're supposed to do something a little different than what they're supposed to do, and I don't mind saying to this city council, we think 95 is too much. We think 90 is too much, and that's kind of where I am. I think it seems like it's too much in this small area for this kind of feel, but.
Just a question for the developer. The green space, is that usable green space? Is that retention pond? What? Just a hillside? Retaining wall?
Part of it, you've got Weber Davis Basin pipeline that comes down, and then you've got a fault line. And so we will green space whatever we can based on the elevations. We're excited about that because we feel like we can create some spots where folks can come down and look at the views because it sits higher than the homes below. It kind of tears up. And so we'll be looking at keeping probably the northern part as more natural, that has more trees, and probably creating a path that goes along the ridge with some places to sit and stop and look at the view.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a clarification question. So on this, you have to help me out. What has already been signed? What's it called, or what's been approved, or something?
Annexation agreement.
Okay, the annexation agreement. So, does that vest anything in the developer, and if so, what?
That's a good question. You can't bind a legislative decision by an agreement. So the fact that they said they would zone it R18, I'm not sure how binding that is because
but an agreement,
they haven't gone through the process.
But agreement inherently is binding. So I'm saying, what are they bound to?
But they can say you can. I mean, in my practice, we often have agreements with bodies that have elected bodies in them, and you say this agreement is subject to.
So I guess that's my
final
question:
approval.
what is that annexation agreement contingent upon or subject to?
Well, it's obviously subject to first them signing it, which hasn't occurred yet.
And then
it also requires the process to go through the prescribed method. So there has to be the actual action taken by the city council of finalizing the annexation and assigning a zone or zones to the property.
I mean, what it tells me, Josh, is that the city council agreed. They said, we're okay with this number of units on that property, and that would allow for an R18 zoning, and they were good in giving that. And so we might recommend something less, but it sounds like the city council's already made the decision about what they're going to allow there.
And I agree with that. What I'm trying to get at is, are we bound by that? And if so, to what extent?
I don't know that we are.
Yeah, we're not bound by it.
Right, I know, but I guess we're recommending what we think. If the city council is bound, then we are, and if they're not, then we're not.
Yeah, well, and really the question becomes, how relevant do we want to be in the decision that the city council is going to make?
Yeah.
If we recommend something far less, and the city council will say, well, they could say, well, that's fine. You can recommend whatever you want, but we've already made an agreement.
So on that line. And this is maybe I'm speaking to those who are concerned about this, and I know I might be reiterating something that's already been said. The question of density has already been answered in the city council's mind.
Sounds like, yeah.
And so
I disagree. I think it's possible, and I don't know, but I think it's possible this city council could said, well, this is the maximum number we'd allow, but we're going to defer to the planning commission, who has this responsibility to decide whether that's too much or not. And I think we're responsible to make that judgment call because that's what the city council wants us to do.
Which I agree that we are responsible for that, but I think you're being too generous in their trust in us by saying that.
Well, we're going on 3 hours, so I'd like to have this be meaningful.
Yeah,
you might be right. Okay, so let's step off density because I know where I am on that. Are we? What about the sidewalks? I like having sidewalks, and it seems crazy to me to say this is an active
That's what I was thinking.
community that we're going to have these senior active people walking, but they don't want sidewalks. But that makes sense. It just doesn't seem.
Well, the city standard is to have sidewalks on both sides.
It doesn't seem
correct?
safe.
On public
And
streets, yes.
what's the rationale that's been given for only having it on one side?
I think
The engineering and then the active part.
And that they can walk on the streets because it's not going to be as crowded. And then there's the flat.
But then if it is the older generation, they're going to have to shovel them.
No, the HOA does that.
Oh, does the HOA do that?
Yeah, that's the.
Oh, okay.
That's why they're so popular.
I think the biggest issue in this case is where the property's fairly steep.
Yeah.
You put a road, and our standard is that the curb and gutter on each side of the road is at the same elevation. So you're putting a 55-foot wide flat space on a 10% slope hill, so it's a matter of cut and fill.
I think, Andy, you said that was an area of concern, right? Or at least that you wanted us to.
I've sat in this chair for many meetings when the lack of sidewalk was discussed at length.
Yeah.
And it's a lot easier to do it up front than it is to come in and retrofit it 10 years from now.
I can say that I just personal experience, it's not really the same, but it is in the sense where I live, which is in Old Town Kaysville. There's sidewalk on one side of the street by code. It's probably the only place by code in the city where it actually says that, and I don't like it. So, no. Yeah, you don't walk on the sidewalk on one side of the street. Now, granted, there's trees and the sidewalk's terrible, what have you, but you walk in the middle of the road, which isn't fun with kids. So, but there's no kids up here. So I don't know.
Grandkids. They'll be grandkids.
The grandkids. Okay, there you go, grandkids.
I just have a question. Have you looked at any other type of plat configuration with less dense lots? I think that's why we're still sitting here just kind of thinking about it, because we really like it, I think. It's just that there are a lot of houses that you're planning on putting in there.
Yeah, we have one with townhomes.
Okay, so that was the other, the only other plat.
Can I ask you a question with that? Is just what would you like to see? Because like with the active adult clientele, they don't want big lots.
Right.
6,000 to 8,000 is about what they want. They want some area in the backyard, and we just did one in West Bountiful, and they had 15 feet in the backyard, which is the tightest I've ever had, and they love it. Okay. You can do a lot with less, and so I think it's more the principle is what is the character that you're building inside this subdivision. And if you give us a chance, when we come back for final, we'd love to show you what we're planning, what we can do. But, you know, I think that's what is tough about it is you take out lots, but what do you do with it? Because people don't want bigger lots, if that makes sense.
Okay.
I personally don't have a problem with it. I think it adds some diversity to the area.
I do like that.
You'll have some folks that would love to live in this area, but they don't want a big lot.
Yeah.
This would give them the opportunity to do that. And I think, for those who do have the big lots, I don't know that this is really going to affect you that much.
Okay.
I just have a quick question. Looking at a satellite photo, and this is for the Tanglewood residents that hopefully one of you can answer. Do you have sidewalks on both sides of the street? It appears they're on one side of the street in the adjoining neighborhood. So this would be in keeping with it.
I think this has one side of just that. I know that's not Tanglewood, but
I'm just looking at a quick satellite picture, and it looks like much of it is exactly the same, one sidewalk on one side. I realize that's Layton, and that okay. But we're talking about consistency.
No, I know. I'm just teasing.
I know.
Okay.
Somebody have a motion?
Well, can we give it a try?
So what are we making a motion on?
Okay.
Recommend approval or
of preliminary plat?
Of the preliminary plat.
Or not recommend?
a reminder as you make the motion that if any sort of approval needs to be subject to the annexation and zone designation being completed.
All right.
Subject to annexation. Okay. Okay. I'll make a motion. Okay, I'll make a motion to approve the Orchard Ridge Estates subdivision preliminary plat, subject to the annexation of the
Annexation agreement.
annexation agreement
And the zoning.
and zoning. Oh,
How about sidewalks on the two sides of the public streets?
okay.
Did you, is that, you want to do you want to do it as is, which is one side?
I was going to do it as is.
Okay.
Okay.
As is.
Do we have a second?
No? We want two sidewalks?
I'll second it.
Then I think you start, Will.
Oh, are we voting? No further discussion on the
Well,
motion,
do you want to? No.
Yeah, I'm just curious if anybody has any other discussion on that particular motion.
I don't.
All right.
My discussion would be I want less density and I want two sides of the sidewalk, but I'm not sure. That's kind of where I am.
That sounds like a dissenting opinion.
He asked for it.
I know. No, I'm saying that's a good thing.
No.
So
you can just say
so
that's what
start
you're
voting and I'll say.
Yeah. I'll vote aye.
Aye.
Aye, and I'm not trying to say dissenting opinions are bad. I'm just saying.
I know.
Aye.
Nay.
Aye.
Don't you want to explain your nay?
I just did.
Oh, okay. Because I think the city council needs to hear the nay.
Right.
Yeah.
And
I
why?
agree.
I think it's
agree.
too dense, too many houses, and I think they need to have two sidewalks. I don't like not having sidewalks.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I agree with
Just a
sidewalks.
quick announcement, this will probably
Just say
not go to the city council, well, it will not go to the city council next
That's for-
week.
Yeah. You need to hear this.
I believe it'll probably go either in one of their meetings in October or possibly the first meeting in November.
Oh, okay.
So you residents that have concern and want to come to the city council, keep an eye on the agendas. But it won't be forwarded to next week's meeting.
Great. Thank you. That's helpful. All right. Next. Are we done? We're on number.
We're to the hard ones now.
What happens when you go?
We're on number 5
What?
of 11.
Oh my gosh.
Okay. We'll move quickly to a public hearing on and preliminary final plat approval 40 East Crestwood PUD subdivision at 40 East Crestwood Road for Brian Neville. And this is the
amended
one that was amended for this.
This was not amended. This one was approved about 2 years ago. They failed to, the amended to the agenda, sorry.
Yeah.
Plat was not amended. It was approved about 2 years ago. Our ordinance says that if they have not recorded the plat or submitted it for recording within a year, that approval expires. There's a couple exceptions. But essentially, they have done nothing for the last year and a half. They have now put things together where they're able to complete the development of the project. Our process is they just have to go through the process and be reapproved again. Everything is the same as it was 2 years ago. This is the property on Crestwood Road, just a little bit south of Heritage Park, or west, I mean. It was already zoned R2.
RM zoning.
So the proposal is 2 3-unit structures on the property with a common drive in the middle. There's a approximate rendering of what the units would look like. Floor plan with the garage and living space at the bottom, bedrooms upstairs. This is not an identical thing to what they will build, but something very similar. They've indicated the colors would probably be different, but that's generically what it would look like. 2 years ago, the Planning Commission approved it, subject to them building what they've portrayed, or at least a reasonable facsimile. They have platted it such that each unit could be owned and sold separately. Doesn't mean it will be or will have to be, but each unit will have, or each structure will have 3 units. which can be sold separately as an individual lot or property.
So this is all the same as what was?
It's exactly the same as what was actually before. They had just two lots.
Mm-hmm.
That would be three plexes. This would be more of a 3-unit townhome. Again, since this is preliminary plat, we do have to hold a public hearing.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's do that. Let's open the public hearing. Is anyone here to talk about this item? Going once, twice. Public hearing is closed.
Okay.
Okay, that was
Chair,
quick.
you open for a motion?
Yes.
I would make a motion to grant the preliminary and final plat. Are we doing both, Andy? Preliminary and final?
Yeah, since there's no new engineering to review, I don't see why we can't just
okay.
hold this.
Preliminary and final plat approval for the subdivision at 40 East Crestwood, the PUD subdivision.
I'll second. Aye.
Aye, and I'll say, for all the reasons that I said last time this was here, that's why I'll say aye now.
You're just trying to make this go longer, aren't you?
If anyone's curious down the road, a decision maker, those reasons from the past meeting are incorporated into this decision.
Aye.
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 Great. Okay.
I'm making it quicker. I just didn't say anything.
Yeah. Okay. Number 6, final plat approval for Tyler Meadows subdivision phase 2 at 1020 and 1034 West Smith Lane for Wright Development Group.
We've been working on this in the course of the last few months. This is the property down off of Smith Lane across from the schools. We've already rezoned this property to R1LD and granted preliminary plat approval. They've now got the engineering in good order. The plat is essentially the same as the preliminary plat. No substantive changes. That's the preliminary. That's the final.
You said there were no substantive changes?
No, there's not. It's essentially identical. Again, the engineering is now in good order, and so we're ready to recommend final plat approval for this one.
Okay, any discussion?
Usually finals are just
Finals are finals.
the formal
Yeah.
stamping of
No
been
changes,
approved
then we
earlier.
don't have much to talk about, right?
That should be the case.
Okay. Take a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the final, to give preliminary and,
Just final.
to give final plat approval for Tyler Meadows subdivision phase 2 for Wright Development Group.
Second.
Josh?
Aye.
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 And just based on a comment from the public, I think the motion was exact. You are now the final approval body, which is new, so this does not go to the council afterwards.
Did I say? What did I say?
You got it.
Okay.
Yeah, you got it spot on.
It's just
I don't
new.
know what I said. Okay.
It used to not be that way. So.
Oh, that's right. That changed. Okay.
Okay.
Another final.
Final plat approval for Brady Estates subdivision at 993 South Sunset Drive for Robin Barkdall.
Once again, we've been working on this. You should be familiar. This property was recently rezoned again to R1LD. You reviewed and approved the preliminary plat. Final plat's now been submitted with the appropriate engineering. Again, it's in all material aspects the same as the preliminary plat. Preliminary plat is shown there. Sorry, I went the wrong direction. Final plat is now completed the engineering. So just by way of reference, when we talk about this, sometimes the actual lot dimensions vary by a foot or two just because they actually do final survey on it. But as you can see, the lot number is the same, the lot configuration is the same, the road pattern's the same. So when I say it's essentially the same as the preliminary plat, that's, I'm not
Allowing for some
allowing for
small
minor adjustments for the
minimus, yeah.
final engineering. So in fact, they've removed the home that was previously on lot 1, and ready to build this subdivision. So again, we'd recommend final plat approval for this Brady Estates subdivision.
Okay. Is there any discussion on this one?
The only comment I had was I guess it goes in the development agreement, right? If we wanted a fence or something, the developer to put up a fence.
Does not have a development agreement. I've been contacted by both the developer and the adjacent neighbor stating that they have met with each other and resolved the fence issue.
Oh, they did? Okay.
So we don't have to worry about it. Okay. Got a thumbs? Is that a thumbs up? Okay, let the record so reflect. All right. We'll take a motion.
I'll make a motion that we grant final plat approval for Brady Estate subdivision for Robin Barkdahl.
Second.
You start.
Aye.
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 Great. Next is a public hearing and review of an ordinance establishing the creation of the position of an administrative law judge. Okay.
It's 10:20, so I'll be very brief on these.
And the parameters in which that office functions, amends, and adds to multiple sections of Kaysville City Ordinance.
I'll be much briefer than the title.
Yeah, please.
So on this particular one, currently our ordinances are not clear. For example, if a staff decision is made, it is very clear that if somebody's got a complaint or problem with the way that we've made a decision, that would then come before the Planning Commission. But where the Planning Commission is a final approval, or if the City Council is the final approval, such as a subdivision or a conditional use type permit, our ordinance has not been very clear on what process takes place if somebody disagrees with that decision. And so in order to solve that, and frankly, to better serve the city and the residents that do wish to make an appeal, the city is proposing putting together the Office of an Administrative Law Judge. In short, it would be a third-party attorney, someone licensed by the Utah Bar, that would, when an appeal is filed, be the person that reviews those and makes a decision. And that's appropriate, in our opinion, based on the process. They're not there to look at what's popular and what everybody wanted, but a very procedural type review of the appeal. It's been used in communities throughout the state. I think it's been pretty effective. I've had experience with these individuals and this type of hearing officer. Again, I think is very good. Third party looks at the city and the applicant, and has been very effective in making decisions that satisfy both, clearly show through the legal process anyway where their decision comes from. So looking at creating that, it is a public hearing. So if you'll at least open it up to that, and then we're looking for a recommendation to the council this evening if you are ready.
Public hearing is now open. Anyone? Now closed. Thank you. It's the shortest public hearing I've ever been to, I think.
I do have a question.
I do too. No, you go first.
Lyle, as I looked through this ordinance, I didn't ever see the term anywhere designating this hearing officer or this administrative judge as the appeal authority. Is that term used anywhere in the ordinance?
I don't know if the appeal authority term is worded. I know it speaks to appeals.
Yeah.
Occasionally.
And I saw all that, but I thought, because the state code, the LUDMA does require that the city council designate an appeal authority.
Okay.
And I was looking for that word or for that language saying that this administrative law judge is designated as the appeal authority for the city, and I did not see it anywhere.
Yeah, and there's probably an appropriate place under 2-8-3. It's appeals. It says appeals provided for in the Kaysville City Code shall be heard by this administrative law judge.
Yeah.
So perhaps just a tweak on the language to say that they are the appeal authority could be appropriate. I don't know if that addresses that or not.
And I was going to say in 2-8-2A, you could say at the end of appoint to preside over administrative hearings as the appeal authority.
Yeah, that would work.
Okay.
Looking at it. But.
Yep.
So is this a contract employee? I mean, is this someone that's just going to be hired for a couple hours a month or whatever it turns out?
Yeah, I assume it'd be a contract employee, some sort of retainer type contract agreement. Yeah.
This is pretty common. A lot of cities are starting to do this, and it's a really good practice.
So,
I nominate Josh.
This, I guess, work through with you on this through whatever. That didn't make any sense. 8.5.15 variance procedures says the Planning Commission shall hear and render judgment on requests for variances from the requirements of the chapter, which is how we've operated. And then 19.1-2 says that the administrative law judge is the one that would grant variances.
Yeah, so currently, because the Title 19 is the subdivision ordinance, and because a variance criteria is so specific, the city council being typically, the planning commission, I guess now, is the final decision maker on a subdivision. So I suppose it could behoove you to put it back in your court as the variance body for that.
Currently, the ordinance for Title 19 says the city council is the only one that can grant a variance for the subdivision ordinance. The planning commission grants variances for Title 17, which is the land use ordinance.
Which is a whole different process.
So they're just transferring that, anything that the city council would have looked at, to the administrative.
Now, okay, yeah. I confess I didn't read through every word, but I don't think I saw it, at least in my first reading. Is there an appeal to the appeal that stays within the city? Or after the administrative law judge, does it go to a district court?
It goes to the district court.
Yeah, and I believe it does state that after the administrative law judge.
Typically in accordance with the state statute.
Which is what I would prefer, right?
Yep.
Okay. So let me just clarify if I understand. If the staff makes an administrative decision that an applicant does not agree with, then by and large, that appeal will go to the administrative law judge?
Most of those, our ordinance states, would go to the planning commission.
First to the planning commission.
And then appeal to the administrative law judge?
Yeah.
That's how it's written. Okay. Is the council ever an appeal authority? I guess that in the... Well, no, that's for variances. Sorry, is the council ever an appeal authority?
Not for land use decisions based on this process. So there are staff grievances and things like that where they can function as that appeal body, but this person would be the appeal authority ultimately to all land use decisions. Does this address the staff appeal grievances to the city council? It does not. It's in a different section of ordinance and already defined, so this doesn't. And why wouldn't we, maybe this is a question to you all, why wouldn't we suggest that to go to the administrative law judge? I think it would probably make city council a lot happier to not have to get into the middle of staff grievances.
That's a whole different area of law.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is why can't the administrative law judge make those decisions too?
They could.
That's what I'm saying.
That's up to the city council.
Yeah, and I'm saying take that off the city council's plate, and so that they don't have to, make quasi-judicial decisions about employees.
Yeah, that's really up to them if they want to do that.
The city council hasn't asked for that. And secondly, if they did, you wouldn't see it because it's not part of the land use code.
Right. So they're saying don't talk
nothing
about
that
it.
the planning commission would be
We don't
involved
talk.
with
We
at
just
all.
don't.
Yeah, got it. I got it. Okay.
Good idea, though.
Yeah. Let's see. What else did I have? Again, you can maybe tell that I haven't spent as much time as I would prefer on this. A couple things that I noted that I didn't see. There's no standard of review necessarily. I would like an administrative law judge to be able to look at whatever they are reviewing completely afresh, which would be de novo. And then under 2, and I didn't see that anywhere, and then number 2-8.4, the only real standard that I see might be applicable to their decision making is the administrative law judge shall determine if substantial evidence supports the decision below. I don't know that I entirely...
That's not a de novo.
Right. I don't know that I entirely like that.
Which section of those that in
So 2-8-4B.
Another way to talk about this is how much deference do you give to the earlier decision?
Yeah, right. This is enacting Chevron into city ordinance. Okay.
This is giving some deference to the decision maker, and that's the question. Do you want to make it so that it's de novo, which means you start all over again?
Yeah, and I don't support that. at all. I think what the appeal authority ought to be looking at is on the record, what the record is of the decision that was made above, or below, or however you want to look at it.
So
the previous body.
I know it's 10:30, so maybe don't go too far. Or maybe I won't even ask this question, but I'm going to.
I was gonna say, I think you will.
Yeah, I think I will. Why? Why is that the better approach?
Because I think otherwise you're opening it up to a whole nother brand new hearing and decision-making process. The decision-making process is your administrative process that you set out, whether it's the planning commission or whether it's staff or whether it's the council if they are still in the loop on that, or whoever makes that decision. That's where the decision ought to be made, and they ought to meet all of the requirements to doing that, including substantial evidence and stating that, putting it on the record, and then the appeal authority just looks at to see if they did that correctly and they based it on substantial evidence. I don't think it's really appropriate to have another whole new process in front of a single individual and give them the authority to make a whole new decision.
So let me make and I think I agree. I think I agree with many of those things. Let me just play devil's advocate. This kind of gets into separation of powers.
Yeah.
This is an executive type decision that staff makes,
yeah.
And the judicial branch comes in and says, was it the right decision? If it's de novo, if it's substantial evidence or on the record or what have you, they're bound, and so there isn't as much separation of power. They can do something that, as long as there was something on the record, it might have been completely out in left field. But if it's on the record, if there's something that they can base it on, then the judicial branch's hands are tied.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying.
What was the language? Substantial
evidence.
So determine if substantial evidence supports the decision below.
Yep.
So that's not a lot of difference.
No.
But it's some difference.
Mm-hmm.
You say?
Well,
yeah, somewhere in that range of you give a little bit of. I mean, let's talk about a couple of different scenarios. Yeah, because part of this deference thing in the judicial world is based on a trier of fact sits in front of and listens to people giving testimony and examines their credibility and whether they have nervous twitches and whether the documents looked funny or those kinds of questions. Are those kind of things relevant here, or is it mostly a judgment call?
So I guess this is how I look at it. An applicant comes, if we're just looking at a city staff decision that's getting appealed, an applicant comes to the city staff and they lay out their case or their application or whatever. It's one person, maybe a 2 or 3 representing a company or what have you, and then it's 1 or 2 or 3 staff members, right? And the staff comes to a decision. These people don't agree with it. They essentially make the same case that they made to staff to the administrative law judge. So it's not like But
in your situation, couldn't the person come and say, "Oh, and also I'm going to bring up a new diagram. I'm going to bring different
new
people.
evidence.
I'm going to bring in a geotech survey," and what it does is it gives them another bite of the apple.
Exactly.
Is the concern.
Exactly. That's part of the concern that I have.
Right, and I guess what I'm saying is what's wrong with that? If it gets to the right decision.
Because then you're giving
all that evidence should have been given to the original decision makers in the first place.
Don't waste the time at the beginning. Bring your game, bring it all, and it also it gives a little more efficacy to the staff's work, importance,
No, I don't distrust the staff.
Oh, yeah, you do. You said earlier.
And I think that they would by and large make the decision, but
Right.
I'm just make a right decision. But
No.
I think sometimes, if I make this much more broader, just to use an example, when bureaucrats at the state level make decisions that essentially protect their interests as their job, it's not always the right decision, whether it's got substantial evidence on the record or not. And I would love something like this, where a neutral administrative law judge that's not employed by the state to make decisions overseeing state bureaucrat decisions. Now, I know that's not always entirely possible, but to the extent we can mitigate those risks, I think we should try.
I don't disagree. I wonder if we can come up with a different, different language of a standard. Because I like the idea of saying, look, the record is what the record is, and that's what they should make the decision on. But I also think it's okay. I mean, can you come up with a de novo on the record?
I don't know.
Confine it to the record and say it's de novo. You don't have to consider what the other people considered. You just can't look at you can't look at new things.
Which is, and that's a balance, I guess, isn't it?
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do.
You're saying don't open a can of worms.
Don't reopen.
And I'm saying let them
make their own decision.
Not give any deference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder if we just got up and left while they're having this.
They wouldn't even know.
Why would you want to go home? I mean, really, what could you have
So,
to go to?
a question from staff's end: if somebody brings in,
we're gonna have an arm wrestle. Come on, John.
If an applicant were to bring in additional information, I would assume that they could remake application and it could be re-reviewed at a staff level,
with
instead of at
different
this other
information,
body.
sure.
So if they provide that new evidence that you're talking about, we would typically look at it again as a new application. There's
So
a
it would start the
different-
clock over again, though, because there's
Process.
a deadline ticking on appeals. You know what I mean?
Well, there's a difference between if we deny something, they can bring the same application in tomorrow.
Yeah.
What Lyle's saying if they bring it in tomorrow with additional evidence,
you might say, oh,
we look at it
Yep.
based on the new
Approved.
application.
Or whatever. Or deny it, whatever. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, despite Tom, what you said, I think we came to a pretty good resolution.
High five.
We have to my right, to my left. We're here in the center. Does that make sense to you all?
Yes. And I think that's the intent.
Yeah.
It's not, you didn't dot the I on your record, so it's void.
Yes.
Let's look at it. And I think the standard at the judicial court level is, at least on legislative decisions like rezone, is could a normally intelligent person arrive at the same conclusion? Doesn't mean it has to be right or wrong, but is there enough evidence there that a normal person could arrive at that same conclusion you did?
Well, and on legislative issues, I mean, it's even less than that. It's really broad.
Yeah, and I don't like
It's like as long as you're not doing something that's unconstitutional
your concern.
or clearly illegal.
So do we want to propose language change?
Because I think this doesn't get there.
Yeah, I agree. So do you want to write it
I'm
in?
not gonna
Don't do it right now.
Right now. But I think they should try to
I think
change
we
it.
understand what your intent is,
Yeah.
and we'll get with our attorney.
We'll let the city attorney.
Yeah, the two
write it up.
concepts would be de novo, but on the record.
Yeah.
Confined to the record.
So whoever the decision maker initial was, whatever they base their decision on, that's what the administrative law judge has to review.
Same
But
application.
They don't have to give any deference.
Boy, but I just think that gives people another bite at the apple.
But
And
this
people
isn't a
that would
court,
say,
though.
why do we care what the planning commission decides? Whatever they say, we're just going to go to the administrative law judge and get him to decide it.
And that's how the judicial system works.
Yeah, I suppose.
That's how appeals work. It's not retrying the case. That's how appeals work. You go to a court of appeals and you get to remake the same argument you made at the district court, and then you go to the Supreme Court and you get to make the same argument again. It's not a bite of the apple.
No,
it's
but
one
I
process.
think really investing them with more power than they should have, because the administrative decision is made with this body, not with the administrative law judge. This way, you're kind of saying to the administrative law judge, you get to make the decision.
You're the body.
Yeah.
Planning commission doesn't matter what the planning commission says. Ultimately, it's going to be what the administrative law judge says.
That's a good point. Yep.
They may not be a planning minded. Okay. So do we have a...
okay. I'm not, it's too late.
Well, so, I mean, so what are we doing? Would this be a motion to recommend it, passage?
Yeah.
Recommend.
Yeah. I think with your suggestion about the appeal authority language in there, that we need to get that term in there somewhere.
Yes, I've got a note on that.
Could someone tell Anne Marie how to spell de novo?
D-E
I don't even know how to pronounce it. I have no clue.
D-E space N-O-V-O.
Right.
And you can italicize it so it looks fancy.
It's Latin, okay?
Yeah. Okay, so do we have a motion here?
Go ahead, Matt.
I don't know. I'm not sure I like the motion.
Oh.
So somebody else make it.
Make
Will,
it
I think
like
Will. I
this.
think you've got it. I think it's yours.
I would recommend that we or make a motion that we recommend approval of the ordinance with the changes that it include the term appeal authority. And I'm sorry, I'm not going to be specific about it, but I think Matt had it there somewhere. And what was the other thing? Or was that it?
That was your it, and then Josh had.
It was that,
concern
and then the
about
standard of review were the two
standard
items,
review.
I believe.
And so
He wants to keep the standard review as it is, right?
Yeah, I do.
That's clarification. Okay, so we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, now do we have any discussion about whether this standard of review thing is?
So, I guess I'm not exactly comfortable with how it's worded, but I'm not necessarily now saying that it needs to be entirely afresh. So I guess on that, if
lower the deference, but have some deference. Is that where you are?
And
Wilfred?
don't expand the
Limited to the record.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not accepting that.
You don't want any. So you want to have your motion stand with no change in deference.
Mhm.
Okay. So now let's vote on that.
Is it my turn?
Or do we have a? We
I
can have a
second-
competing
I
motion.
second it.
We had a second, yes.
Yeah.
And I think.
So.
Wait, count them up.
Show me that language that you don't like.
It says right here. The administrative law judge shall determine if substantial
evidence
evidence supports the decision below.
I'll vote aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Nay.
Aye.
Okay, good. I think that's a good result. I would have said nay and would have still passed. But, okay. Ooh.
Call the.
Are we
the short title?
I'm not going to say
Nine.
this.
10. What?
There's no
Yeah.
there is no urgency on this item.
On which one?
On the cell towers?
Table it.
Correct.
So, well, and if there's no urgency, let me ask you this. Have you also looked at the ordinance changes to make with regard to the small cell towers?
Yeah, we've been in discussion with the power department and the small cell and within the right of way and that infrastructure.
Yeah.
So that
Because of the changes that were made in the
in
state code recently.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
So, I'm sorry, we're at number 9?
Correct.
Why don't we have the public hearing since we noticed it up?
Yeah, you need to hold a
Have
public
have a
hearing.
hearing because it has been noticed, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
All right. You coming through tonight? Mr. Councilman, are you going to finally? Public hearing is now open.
What's our record for this?
A length of time?
Oh,
You know, I'm-
It's gone a little longer than this.
Was this like?
No, we're
It's
not.
gone
there.
longer than this?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Or less than half of the city council.
And we don't want to beat it.
Yeah, this is not
Okay,
filibuster
okay,
stuff.
for-
you pulling up? Go ahead.
Larry Page, for the record, Shakespeare's exact line was, "The first thing we do is kill all the lawyers." It was stated by Dick the Butcher in Henry IV, Part 2, Act 4, Scene 2, Line 73.
You have substantial evidence for
I
that.
think that's a threat.
Larry, do you have substantial evidence
On
for
the
that?
record.
On the record, that's right.
Okay. So we've closed the public hearing. And we'll table discussion for a later time.
If that's your choice, yes.
Yep, if you'd like any intro to think about, that's fine. If you want to table it and get the intro later, that's fine too. We'll leave it up to the commission.
That's good.
Table it. There was obviously no one here to talk about it, so we can discuss it at our leisure.
Yeah.
Right, so do we table that, somebody?
I move that we table that.
Second.
Aye.
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 Funny
Call-
how they knew the exact order on that one.
Call to the public. We'll skip no public,
We're not done.
unless you have another quote. No. We do appreciate Shakespeare quotes every once in a while. Okay, reports and correspondence and calendar.
Next meeting's on the 27th, unless anyone's got items to report. I think there have been a few of you at trainings of recent, but that may be a story for another day or
Yes,
offline. Otherwise, I believe we're
You've
just on
got the
track.
APA conference coming up October 4th and 5th?
I forget the dates, but in Sandy, and I think we've heard from a couple who are interested in participating there. So,
Yeah. And you've got the Utah Land Use Law Conference coming up October 24th, I believe.
okay. And I still haven't seen items from them, so get on their website and pass it out. I tried to check it after it was mentioned last time, and I didn't know if they posted it, but we can find that for you.
Can I raise just a quick question on the annexation thing? When you mentioned you were working on that and then you'd done that, you had to make some changes to the annexation policy declaration?
Yeah, so in order to annex property, it has to be included in the city's annexation policy plan.
And it wasn't?
And it previously was not, so we first went through a process to include it and did all the public hearings and noticing on that, and then a separate process to certify and start an annexation process subsequently.
So I asked my compatriot here if the Planning Commission had heard that, and he said, we haven't heard anything about it. And annexation policy declarations, my understanding is planning commissions are supposed to
I believe what needed to go through the Planning Commission did.
Oh, they did?
I'm sure it did, yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
They haven't.
It's been a long time.
I think it's near as involved as the city council, but I believe the policy plan.
Okay.
I remember that.
The reason I bring that up, if that had not been the case, would have been easily challengeable by, and you've got a lot of folks here that I think would be wanting to challenge it.
There's been a lot of process, and I doubt there was much conversation on it because it wasn't an actual annexation, but just the planning portion of it. So,
yeah.
But we can confirm that. But I believe the processes were followed appropriately.
Okay, good.
So, I think I'm going to ask the same question again. We were talking about what part is going to be annexed, and they were allowing that little part that looked like an island but wasn't really an island. So why can't those that Brittany Stearns? Why don't they just draw her out of the annexation if she doesn't want to be annexed?
That could happen.
Oh, that's up
the
to the council, I guess.
Well, they said that she signed it, though.
Oh, she had signed it?
I'm not sure if she did or not.
It might have been the prior
The rest of
owner.
the property around her signed.
Yeah, I mean, she's got a small portion,
She's got
so
an
if she
acre.
doesn't sign it, it still goes through. I
That's
get that.
just
but-
But it
so
doesn't
not even a
have-
moral victory. It's just a meaningless victory.
Yeah, why
Yeah.
not just draw her out of it? Let her, and Munson too, I don't know,
Muntz doesn't live in the county. He's already not included.
in the county?
He's part of the unincorporated neighborhood to the south. So one of the reasons when the development originally came in that they spoke with one neighborhood to the south and not those to the north is they were originally considering annexing everything to the south. Based on the interest and comments received from that neighborhood, they decided to leave them out of the annexation. So we went through the process. The county ultimately would prefer we take everything if possible, but consented that based on the process and discussions that were had, that what was proposed makes sense. So leaving one lot out or not, honestly, hasn't been brought up, but that could cause angst with other entities.
I think it makes sense to annex the whole thing. I just was curious, and I don't like people having to get forced into it. But it's also interesting. I'm not sure if it was Josh's comments, but somebody kind of alluded to the fact, or maybe it was Tom, like, you're not even from Kaysville, right? I mean, it's a difficult situation where they choose not to have a municipality, and so therefore they're disenfranchised from these kinds of decisions. It's
I had that question
interesting.
come up in the last land use training session about if they're not from the city, do we have to listen to them?
Yeah.
And I guess technically no,
but we're here.
But I mean,
Which is really the point I was making is, do the developers need to? No. Do they even have to care what the Layton residents say? No. All they have to care is what the city council ultimately decides, and the city council is beholden what the city
I think that's a good point.
citizens.
And-
But they, as a community decision, is what the point I was making. Maybe but that's not our call. That's something that the developer needs to decide or whatever. But
by the way,
and it's interesting to have people come and say, you're not representing, you don't even listen to us. And it's like, well, we don't have to.
Yeah.
You're not.
You're not
You
residents.
don't listen, and
I mean,
second
it's
of
not,
all, you're not in Kaysville.
You don't really want to say that,
right.
But it's.
The funny thing was they brought up the fact that the landowner doesn't live there.
Yeah.
Well,
That's
neither
true.
do you. You live in another city, so what's the point?
That's true. By the way, so property values, 38 years of doing this.
Yeah, I know, it doesn't.
Almost every single public hearing that we have on whatever it is, it's going to lower my property values, it's going to increase traffic, and it's going to kill the kids.
And
Comes up almost
in
everything.
those instances, how often is it based on data?
Yeah. Oh, never.
Never. It's always
Never.
anecdotal.
Well, sometimes mean, you know, there are times when it's, okay, this probably will affect their property values negatively.
Yeah.
But a lot of times they say it will affect it negatively when it most likely will be positive.
But honestly, folks,
Or not.
But we're not supposed to.
property value is not a consideration
Yeah.
in land use unless it's a total taking of property.
Yeah.
Because anytime you zone, you're going to increase or decrease property values anytime you do something with zoning.
Yeah, and everyone's, a few years ago, somebody here said that, and we should probably say it a few times, which is, that's outside of our consideration. But the character and feel, which is what I was trying to say, is
sure.
more relevant.
It is.
Anyway, okay. Let's move to adjourn, somebody.
Maybe one more report, just because the city has now put out a job announcement for a community development director. And that will be to replace my position. I'll be leaving the city sometime in the next 2 to 3 months.
What? Oh, wow.
So,
Greener
Do we have a
pastures?
vote on
Where?
that?
no, I've just, if you're familiar with the state retirement system, once you reach 30 years, you can receive your pension without any penalty, but you can't work for the state anymore or the government.
Any government
Anything that's
entity.
on that system.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
So
But you could go work somewhere else and
I
double
can go
dip.
work as long as it's not on that system.
You could be an administrative law judge.
Not according to our ordinance, because it
Have to
required
be
you
at
had a
the
law
bar.
degree.
Oh.
Those are easily come by.
So
Yeah.
Well, I'll send you a link.
it's just the second page of the minister certificate that you can get online.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the backside.
So they're looking for that position. I'm not sure exactly how everything's going to work. I've served as the community development director and the city engineer, and the city's almost tripled since I started working in those two capacities, and it's probably not feasible. And, you know, I've grown into it, so it's been fine, but to pull somebody fresh off the street and expect
Do both.
to cover both those is probably a large expectation. So I
Yeah,
think
it's just,
through this process, they'll probably separate those two positions.
and will the economic development person not necessarily be attached to the planning commission, or will they?
No, the community development person will probably be more attached, and the city engineer
Will be detailed.
less
Less.
attached.
Uh-huh.
We'll only deal with, in fact, it could be, I think, in a lot of cities, a subdivision that's straightforward. Community development director gives it to the engineer, he reviews it, gives it back, and that's all he does.
Yeah.
That's all the involvement he has in a subdivision.
That's a pretty common process in a lot
Sure.
of cities. Yeah.
Well, that's sad news.
That is sad.
It's not that sad.
Well, sad for some of us.
Yeah.
Do we have a motion to adjourn now?
Yes, please.
I move that we adjourn.
Thank you.